Want to call the June 21st, 2016 meeting of the Planning Commission to order, please. Want to start out tonight with the citizens forum. Want to start out tonight with the citizens forum, and tonight we have the youth member of our Planning Commission that's been with us for a couple of years now is going off to college.
Yep.
And we have appreciated your input over the last couple of years. You certainly are always informed.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to serve on the commission with you. I learned a lot.
And you have some people here tonight who have helped you be a part of this.
Yeah, in the back row is my mom and dad and my sister. They're representing the college I'm going to tonight.
Very well, I might add.
Yeah, wow,
Yes.
I didn't plan that.
Even with my bad eyesight, I can see that.
Well, hey, your input has come from a somewhat different perspective than the rest of us, but at the same time, it's your love of Farragut. And so we really appreciate it, and we're going to miss you. And as I've said before, you're going to be a hard act to follow. But we really appreciate that you've done this, so thank you.
Well, I'm especially going to miss him because he sits next to me. He always is so good at pulling up these things on the phone that I'm not accustomed to doing, you know. It's wonderful. I don't know what I'm going to do.
I don't know. We can FaceTime during the meetings.
And you're serious, too.
Sure, yeah, why not?
It's Thursday night, 7 p.m. Gotta dial in.
I don't know. Is this on TV in Michigan? Or is this
I don't think
no?
so.
Okay.
I don't think we go quite that far. You definitely would be the only one watching. So thank you again. We really appreciate your input these
Thank you.
past couple of years, and we appreciate the time you took to be a part of Farragut.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything with the?
You have two, it looks like a second scout has
Scout.
walked in. We have William Mason, who is going for his Eagle. I think this is his last, this is your last, second to last badge. He's already done his Eagle, his project. And it looks like we have a scout in the back that just walked in.
We always ask the scouts to come up and give us your name and tell us the troop that you're in. And please come up to the microphone. And if you're working on a project, let us know what that is. And we appreciate you coming.
Hi, my name is William Mason. I am part of Troop 125 based off in St. John Newman Church. And I'm currently a life scout working on my Eagle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Cooper Berry, and I'm from Troop 246, and I'm here. I'm a Star Scout. I'm here working on something for a merit badge.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate you.
Cooper.
Anybody else have any questions or comments that do not relate to items on the agenda tonight? Anybody on the Planning Commission? Bart, you have anything? No. Okay, then we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I believe we have an item on the agenda that we need some addition to tonight. Since Jack is leaving us, we have a opening on our Planning Commission for the student member, and we have 4 applications and recommendations that are in your packet this week. Did everybody have a chance to look over those, and do we have any comments or questions about this?
Do we need to add that after the approval of the minutes? Okay, so,
Well, it's part of the agenda, approval of the agenda.
oh, it's part of the approval of the, oh, okay.
We would suggest
The
that you just make
agenda
it
with
like
the
item
addition.
3B.
3B.
You know,
With the addition of item 3B.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So, I don't know, you have talked with one of these people in connection with another,
I've talked to 2 of them.
2 of them.
Can we do the approval of the minutes first? Because I have it's 3B, so we need to do the approval of the minutes first, right?
Yeah.
And I have an amendment to make to the.
We were modifying the agenda to get that on
On
there.
the agenda.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I thought we moved
approval of the minutes for the May
And we can
17,
talk-
2018 meeting. Do we have any changes, questions with
I have a
that?
change. In 7, I recuse myself from that vote. So other than that, with that change, I move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we still need to go
Okay.
over 3B.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or on these 4 applications that we have?
Well, just, are they here tonight, and we could have them come to the podium and just introduce
No,
themselves?
No.
Okay.
Bart, can we do that, or should we do that? Because none of us or you have talked with them.
You could have them come back, and I guess if you wanted to. I know that the bylaws were changed, I think a year or 2 ago, so the terms now run on the town's fiscal year instead of the calendar year. So we were trying to
Coming up
get
in
somebody
July.
in place for the July meeting.
I know one of them personally.
Okay, and you have talked to 2 people?
Yes, I might as well say how that happened. 'Cause,
Okay,
as the chairman of the Stormwater Committee, and Violet and Lori interviewed the candidates
For
that
the
had applied for
stormwater.
that position. And one of them had also applied for the Planning Commission,
Who was that?
Hannah.
Hannah, he said.
And
So did Allison, Jake.
we discussed it, and we ended up recommending that we approve Kyle for the stormwater, because Hannah, in our judgment, is a much better fit for the planning commission. And that's just,
Your input to that.
yeah.
Okay, and Jack, who is it that you?
Oh, Nick Lamandry. And, well, I can't vouch for his knowledge about planning. I can vouch for his character, and he's a great guy, hard worker. I know through our work with him at Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
And he's a really a standout guy and stuff.
Okay.
But I'm not sure about how much knowledge he has about planning. I haven't talked to him specifically about that.
Okay,
It is his first choice, the planning commission.
Yeah, he was the only one to put it down for his first choice.
So let me ask you this, Ed, for Hannah, what made you believe that she was a good fit for the planning commission?
Well, she comes across as an extremely ambitious person, very smart, and her interests are more research type things than crawling around in the mud. But anyway, and so that, since we had to, well, so that's the way we ended up doing the Stormwater Commission, taking the other, in hopes that Hannah would get,
Okay, so
Planning
you have
commission.
somebody else at the stormwater, you appointed someone else to the stormwater committee? Okay,
it's all, and they got appoints, and we're, unfortunately, the way these appointments work, we're not very open to are well presented to the members of the committees and boards that were
yeah,
getting them.
yeah.
And timing-wise, it should have been,
maybe we can recommend for next year that the timing, this be done right before school is out,
yeah.
so we can easily get them
Yeah,
in and talk to.
Yeah, I
That-
think it'd be nice for them to come down and spend,
See
3
what they-
minutes or 5
yeah.
minutes at least, instead of just filling out a form.
Right.
yeah.
Just so we can get to know them a little bit.
Well, they cannot get to know, really, because you got to
They
be
can-
willing to dig into the minutia and then still see the big picture, and some people don't really find that very interesting. Only the dorks that stay on for a really long time get it.
So do we have a recommendation of,
Well,
We're gonna vote on it tonight, or gonna have them come in?
Well, that's what I was gonna ask. Do you want us to see if
Vote
we
on it
can
tonight?
get them to come in tonight, next month? Is that too late, or?
I mean, you'll go a month without a staff
youth
representative.
member.
Yeah.
But I think we'll have a better feel for what we're doing if we can give
Yeah.
them some face time.
Yeah. I agree. I would like to meet them
Okay.
if possible. Or at least give us an opportunity to speak with each of them if they're not able to attend the meeting.
Okay, let's ask that.
To postpone 3B?
Okay. All but,
And to encourage them to come to the next
Yeah.
meeting.
second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
The decision till next month.
so we're moving on to item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a request for the approval of re-subdivision plat for the Knox Valley Dental, 11852 Kingston Pike, 1.37 acres, zoned O-1. Dr. Zava, applicant.
This is a minor re-subdivision plat. It's in connection with the dental office that you granted conditional site plan approval to last month. One of the conditions was the replatting of the property. It's currently in 3 lots, and it has a drainage easement running through the middle of it. They're combining the property into a single track and obviously relocating the drainage easement to make the development possible. Staff can approve it or can recommend approval subject to the comments and the recommendations that you have at your seat. One addition on that was we did speak to the property owner prior to the meeting, and they do want to request a variance on the 10% open space lot being created. They do have open space there in their buffer area and in the drainage, but this would be a matter of them having to carve out, an open space lot in the middle of that. It's a minor re-subdivision action, and it's a fairly small piece of property, so staff wouldn't have a problem with that variance being granted based on the limited nature of the subdivision action and the size of the property.
Okay.
So we need to make the
Variance
motion for the
first.
variance first,
Yes,
and then,
Question, I have a question.
sure.
At the last meeting, it said in the final plat, is that what this is, the final plat?
Yes.
It said it'd be required to combine the existing 3. Now, if that's done, I don't know how to read this.
Yeah, they're
existing
taking out
3 into
those
1.
internal lot lines.
It said they'll be removed, but it doesn't say they've been removed.
Well, there's a note there that you might not be able to read. It says lot line to be removed on those on the internal lot line, so it'll be one.
I read that,
Yeah.
but I expected them to be removed before we voted on the final plat.
Well, the lines exist now, so the surveyor showed them and then noted that they're being removed as part of this this replatting action.
So you think it's okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't remove them until we pass they can remove it.
What?
They can't remove it until we pass to remove it.
Which is part of this.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so.
I have one more question, just for formalities purposes. So if we pass these variants, then when we're doing the final approval, it's just going to be 1 and 3, correct? Notes that 1 and 3 for
Yeah.
subject twos? Okay, I just needed clarity on that. So, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the variance?
I have a question first.
Okay.
I'm not sure about number 1. Is that here on the far left? in
Yes.
this- Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Has that been answered?
Well, we either want it to be removed or identified as to what it was, and we weren't sure what they were trying to show there. So they can either identify it and.
Well, they haven't identified it yet.
No, not yet. So that's why it's a condition. We want that fixed
All
on the
right.
plat
Okay.
before
I'm with you.
it's signed off on.
It says
All right. I
C05,
understand.
looks like.
Let's say 5, I thought it said 3.
Yeah, 5 on.
We weren't sure what it was, and so it was just something that, we felt
Gonna have
needed to
to
be
take care of.
clarified or removed prior to it being signed off on by the Secretary of the Planning Commission.
Okay. I'm going to move to grant the variance from satisfying the 10% open space requirement due to the minor nature of the subdivision and the limited land area involved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So now, we're talking about the approval of the re-subdivision plat.
I'd move for approval of the re-subdivision, the plat, subject to items 1 and 3.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Here somewhere tonight. Thank you for coming. And Bart, where do they go from here? Is this, what's their next step?
They'll have to make those corrections to the plat, and then, of course, get it signed and recorded. And then from there may be 1 or 2 little conditions left on the site plan, and as soon as those are satisfied, they'll be able to move forward with the project.
Okay. You
So
all
those lot
understand and hear
lines that
that?
Betty was asking about will be removed on the final plat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're being, they'll no longer exist, and it'll just be one large parcel.
Okay.
Well, one somewhat large.
Parcel.
Yeah, it's 50,000 square feet or so.
Okay. Any questions you have, you can contact the planning office. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Discussion, item number 5, discussion and public hearing on request for the approval of a re-subdivision plat for Watt Road Investments LLC, partial 78.03, 81, 82, 85, 95.01, 96, 97, tax map 151, 18.59 acres, zone PDC, beginning point land survey LLC applicant.
This is another minor re-subdivision plat. It's connected to the planned commercial development that y'all have been dealing with at the corner of South Watt and Kingston Pike there behind Little Joe's. And what they're doing here is they want to divide the property that, was formerly replatted into a single tract. Now they want to divide it into 2 separate tracts, largely for financing purposes. They want to separate out what would be the southern section where the multifamily housing is proposed from the rest of the property that will eventually potentially contain a grocery store and some other retail shops. So they would like to subdivide the property. The areas in gray there that are shaded are the open space areas. So you can see most of those will be associated with the lot for the multifamily housing component of the project. You've got our comments and recommendations there. I don't know if you have any questions on that. One of the key elements there is we do need to see a easement for maintenance and other aspects of the planned commercial development put in place in connection with this plat so that it remains integrated as a planned commercial development. They've put together some language on that that's been forwarded to the town attorney to look at. So one of the conditions that we'd ask is that it's pending the town attorney's approval of that, and then having it noted properly on the plat. But
Okay, is the applicant here? Do you have any comments you'd like to make, or?
The developers are good with everything that
Okay.
you've asked for.
Okay, and so one thing that I want to stress is that no requirements of the PCD zoning district should be compromised as a result of this plat.
That is correct, ma'am.
Anybody else
I
have
have a question. The last sentence in our recommendation says, "One certainty is that as constructed, final plat will also be required once improvements are in place so that any easements reflect as constructed conditions." What does that mean?
They're plotting this now to, to make provisions largely for financing.
Yeah.
As the project develops, if there are minor adjustments in terms of where there's going to be a shared access way or drive or that sort of thing, that'll all have to be finally platted at the end, and any adjustments made, so that it again functions as as sort of a unified development site.
Okay.
And so it was just a matter of they're doing this now, again, largely for financing, and there'll probably, be adjustments along the way, and any of those adjustments would have to be platted at the end.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Since you said you wanted to do this split because of financing, what's the hang up on the financiers?
Daniel Smith, 7033 Stockton Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37909. For multifamily financing, there's different options that you can different government-backed financing, whether it's Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or with HUD financing. So generally, they stick to that specific use, and so this is a mixed-use parcel, but for financing purposes, the entity that's going to finance the multifamily construction isn't going to be a part of the financing structure for a grocery store or for the retail. So there might be three different financing entities that take different parts of this plan, although this is all kind of contemplated by the PCD zoning, which contemplates that the plan itself is looked at as for the setbacks and that sort of thing, but it can be this sort of arrangement is highly practical and necessary to do a development like this. So that's basically what it comes down to.
So do you mean by that you'll probably have one entity financing the multifamily part, one entity financing the grocery part, and one entity doing the commercial that's up front?
Yes, or it could be one entity doing the multifamily and then one entity doing all the retail components of the project.
Okay. Okay.
Part of it's a loan structure for multifamily, you're looking at 30 or 35, 40-year loans. With retail, you're typically doing it for 20 years.
Okay.
It's the federal government who drives a lot of this.
Imagine that.
Okay, and Bart, how does this affect what we have seen so far from a standpoint of the plans that we've seen so far?
Well, so far you've have approved their concept plan, and that was a requirement to get the PCD zoning. They have brought some site plans before you, but they haven't been voted on or approved yet. I think they're here, and they want to. I'm talking to you about a couple of elements. They do have a submittal for next month's that was turned in on Monday, and I think some of these sheets that they want to at least get some input from you on tonight, if possible, are reflected in that submittal. In terms of where they're putting the property line in, it does run, with the area that and sort of properly segregate the areas between the multifamily to the south and the retail component to the north and up along Kingston Pike. So it's not an impediment there for doing that.
Okay, and it
doesn't affect the open space requirements, splitting it like this?
Well, that's one of the things that we're working on the easement aspects with the town attorney, to make sure that that there's shared access to that and that. So again, as was said, the zone does make provisions for internal subdivision like this. It is contemplated within the zone, and so from a planning standpoint, we're looking at the entire development together.
Okay.
But from a financing standpoint, they want to separate it out. So.
Okay.
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments? Okay. Now, we can go ahead and do that and then let them show us what they want afterwards?
Yeah, that'd be
Please.
fine.
Okay, okay. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval of the re-subdivision plat for the Watt Road Investments parcel 7803, 8182, 95, 9501, 96, and 97 as shown, subject to the two stipulations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And you have some show and tell.
Yes, my name's Mark Bollick. I'm the civil engineer on the project 1313 Calmia Road. We just want your input on 4 quick items. And I'll start with the easy one first. I brought pictures.
That helps.
Oh, he did put pictures.
Let you two share.
Okay, thanks.
You two share. I brought big pictures.
Pictures.
You two share. In regards to this, what we're having to do is, as part of our last staff review meeting, is the staff did not like all the HVAC units clustered between the 3 and 4 story split buildings. So the architect went back and put a flat roof in the middle of the building so we can put all the units on the roof. And they will be properly screened, meeting all the town requirements. But he wanted some feedback from you to make sure that this is not something that you're going to look at next month and say, no. So, like I said, we're going to make this short and sweet, I hope. So we would like, if y'all have any comments or questions or anything along that lines, please, now's the time to speak up.
So they will be completely screened
Yes,
from,
you will not be able, the units, we will meet all the town requirements in regards to the units. They will be properly screened. They'll be behind the parapet wall of the flat roof. And I actually saw a roof plan of this, and he didn't have all the units up there. I said, "You sure you're gonna fit all of them up there?" And he goes, "I got room for twice the number of units." So he can make them all fit up there, and structurally, they can make it work. So,
Big improvement.
did you like that?
I like that much better.
Okay.
I think I was the one that probably.
Well, yeah,
didn't
you
like
may
that.
have been, but like I said, we wanted to get your, like I said, we're wanting to make sure that next month when we come in front of you, y'all are on board with everything, we're all headed in the right direction. Okay,
And
what was the second one?
and just as a point of clarity on the
wait a minute.
Pardon?
staff's issue at the staff developer meeting on it was not so much the HVACs being ground mounted, but that they were consuming a lot
They-
of the
and I
open
think-
space that had been
Right.
originally
And I
on the
think
concept plan.
The next thing I'm about to put out in front of you, I think will show the difference.
And the wall here on top is sufficient to cover.
That's the last item. That's the
Okay.
last item.
A picture of what it was last time, by any chance? Have you got the before picture
No, I'm
with you?
afraid I don't, but just imagine that ridge line going all the way across. The only difference would be the ridge line goes all the way across. We're gonna do this. Share one more again. Yeah, this is the parapet right here, that will screen the HVAC right here and right here. That'll screen it, and then this also screens it from both sides. We're gonna do this, the next one. We're gonna do this one more, we're gonna do one more.
Well.
This, and we got one more.
It's a big improvement.
Thank you. Thank you, really like that. Share this with you guys.
The sheets too.
This one here is to show you, get back in front of the microphone. This plan here is to show you that between the 3-4 splits, that we've eliminated all the HVAC units. And on the 3-story ones, we move all the HVAC units to the rear of the building. We want to make sure you all are happy with that. We may reconfigure them, but they will all be behind the building, nothing between the buildings, so you'll have the green space between the buildings.
And how will these be
guess.
screened from?
They'll be properly screened with the screening wall. That's what the little
this the
double
unit
line
you're
around the units is. That's a screening wall that meets the town requirements to screen them from
Oh,
I think you're going to have to point out to me where the units are. I think I see them, but I'm
here
not
it
sure.
is.
Okay,
Here they are.
It's this group right here,
okay,
And over on
this
the other
group
side.
right here, and this group right here.
okay. What's this?
That's covered spaces for where the building has covers going in the garages.
Oh, okay.
One's right over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here.
that makes sense.
In here.
This area right here, this area right here, and this area right here.
Gosh, that's a bunch all together, isn't it?
They'll be overlooking this
One of those, would you?
And these, like, the vacuums will face this way, but, and these
I
are
like a nice
faces
phone
this way
to sleep
and
to.
this way.
You know, you need a noise machine.
You don't have to have a fan.
Make certain that because of the concern of the open space between the units and such, that's why we moved to put them where we have them shown. We may tweak it a little bit more so they're not all grouped up in one big spot, but still have them behind the building and properly screened.
What about the noise level of those?
Yeah, you have
units there?
24 units making noise, they're gonna make some noise, so that's another reason to break them up a little bit. I'm the guilty party for this layout. The architect has already given me a new layout, but they all are still behind the building, nothing between the buildings.
Okay, well,
Do
that's.
do y'all like that?
Yes,
Okay.
and I like, I think it does give some,
Okay.
apartment buildings can tend to look very,
Right.
this kind of breaks it up.
Okay, now, while you're still on that plan, and I'm gonna walk over and point to what I'm talking about, then I'll come back here and talk, okay?
Getting this work out to
Right
bed.
here, right here, right here, and right here, and this area right here. Right here, 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 and right here. Right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here. Okay, now I'll talk. Currently, in order to meet the code for building code, certain percentage of the basement has to be completely buried. Those, what I pointed out to you, are retaining walls between the units. We could eliminate them and make it so you could walk down between the two, but it would add additional cost for construction for us. We would much prefer this, because when I show you the grading plan here in a minute, it'll make some sense. By putting these retaining walls in, now we create a bigger flat area on top and on bottom to be used by the residents. We'll have a fence so someone can't fall over the wall. But we'd like to leave the retaining walls in.
What are they made of?
They will be masonry retaining walls. They'll be like a keystone wall, what I call a keystone, a small block, mechanically stabilized earth wall. Kind of like what it's,
Attractive, it's not going
yes,
to
it's
look
going
like
to
a
be very
bunch of
attractive. It will
concrete blocks.
fit in, it'll be something that looks similar, it will fit in with the, it's kind of like what we're doing at the Overlook. Exactly the same thing we did at the Overlook. We had the same retaining walls at the Overlook. And they're all small block keystone retaining walls that will blend in, and we'll put some landscaping to soften them up in, as part of the landscaping plan too. We would like to keep them in just so we create bigger flat areas between the buildings that could be used for people who need to go walk their dog or play catch with their son or something like that, as opposed to if we slope it, now we got to deal with 11 foot of difference in elevation, and you got a 3-to-1 slope, that's 33 feet, that's all sloped, and you know
So
how.
between the buildings, it'll be a grassy area?
It'll be all grass, yes, except for the retaining wall, yes.
And remind me, which, is it the slope coming down this way towards Kingston Pike?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it would basically be a 3-to-1.
It'd be 3-to-1 slope for 33 feet.
So
And then
you-
have a little bit of a flat area on top and a little bit of a very small flat area on the bottom. By putting the retaining wall, now you have a nice flat area on the bottom and a nice flat area on top.
How tall is the retaining wall?
They're running about 9 to 10 foot tall,
How wide is that space
30
between?
feet,
How much?
30 feet.
30. So that's a big area then for,
Yeah, it'd be a nice,
Why?
it'd be a nice area to go out there and be able, like I said, if you want to go out there and if you have a child that plays soccer, he's got a natural backstop. You know, you can be beating the ball against the retaining wall. It ain't going to move. And he wouldn't be hurting the building by beating it against it either, so. Or if you want to play catch with your kid, or if you want to go out and walk your dog, it'd be a nice little flat area to walk in.
What are you doing about the safety from the upper level?
We have to put a 4-foot tall fence. That's by code. We have to fence it. We have to make it so that someone cannot, unless they try hard, they can't fall over the top, off the top. We will have to fence it. And we'll have to do it in such a way that it's nice and we'll put some landscaping on the top side so you don't see the fence, and the same thing from the bottom. We'll try to soften it up as best we can with landscaping. Okay?
I mean, so what provisions will there be for any sort of pedestrian movement between or
Breezeways
or
have
through the
stairs.
buildings?
The breezeways have stairs that go from the upper stairs to the bottom stairs. The breezeways, there's 2 breezeways in every building. So there's 2 points of access to get down.
Do people, say the neighbor from up north of the property wants to come down, does he have access to these
That's-
breezeways?
Yes, once he walks down, the breezeways are not gated.
Okay.
They're not locked. They're open to the public. So yes.
From a staff perspective, this is just, all things that we'll have to look at and evaluate when we,
I
when we
understand.
review the plans. I mean, it's really the first time
Well,
that I'm
actually,
seeing
the-
it right now, and I'm
The
just
retaining
not going
wall's
to
been on
comment
the
on
last,
it. not-
on the
not
last
off
set
the
of plans
cuff.
that I submitted. The retaining walls have been the retaining walls have been there. We just want some feedback to make sure y'all don't want it so people do you want people to be able to walk between the buildings down? Or just use the breezeways with a set of steps that are already there? And have a bigger flat area that they can take advantage of when they're living there. I personally think I would like the bigger flat area.
And some green.
And it's all green. Either way, it's going to be green. The only intrusion is the little retaining wall, which is going to be a fence and a little bit of shrubbery on either side. So you're talking like a 4 to 6 foot swath between the 2 buildings.
Well, you're going to have a maintenance
Oh.
issue there, aren't you, with
Yeah.
the grassy area?
Well, we're going to have to mow it. It'd be easier to maintain by having it flat than as opposed to a 3-to-1 slope, because then you got to worry about people driving a mower up and down it. And if it gets slick, it gets torn up and it's hard to maintain the grass on it.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if it's all grassy, that if they're playing catch and that sort of thing out there, it's going to be worn area. I know how it
Yeah,
used
well,
to be.
Then that's where the maintenance people get that's what their job is, to make sure it maintains the look of
Something
it.
to consider, that lower sections may not see a lot of sun depending upon how the sun hits there.
But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. We'll look at that and make sure we put the proper landscaping in there to do that, be shade tolerant.
Anybody else having?
Might be something other than grass. but-
It might be,
Yeah.
it may be, but I mean, it's gonna be, we're trying to create
Usable
bigger,
space.
flatter, usable spaces between the building. If
I'm
that's
thinking about
if
what
y'all-
they put over there at McPhee Park, was it?
Anybody else having
that
questions or
playground.
comments?
On this point, and otherwise I'll go to my last one and we'll get out of here.
Okay,
Okay?
let's see it.
Something like that.
I'm sorry, Mike. I didn't, I should have said that, I apologize. I gotta get it right.
I'm not a preacher myself.
You woke everybody up.
Pregnancy. Presidency.
These are, no, the first floor on these are all garages, first floor garages. Okay, here we go, the last exhibit.
That sounds good at home. I'm sure all this sounds
Like
good
that
at home.
rubber stuff at McPhee Park, it might be
And that may be something we consider.
an alternative, yeah.
And I'll give you guys this.
Yeah, I don't think they'd be able to get a uniform on that.
Okay, last thing I need your guidance on. The area, I'll maybe point to it first, okay? To each one of you. What we're gonna be talking about is from here to here, up here, okay? From here to here, up. This is the area I wanna talk about, okay? From here to here, outside of the retaining wall, I wanna talk about that area, okay? Mark, I think you have that plan. Can you pop that up on the screen?
The only one I have in the packet.
I gave Mark all of these in PDF format. Anyways, that's all right. That area that I just pointed to you is the area above the retaining wall that we've all been talking about because it's so tall. It's 32 feet right there by the steps. And if you look on that plan, we have the existing trees from the tree preservation plan. There's 7 trees that meet the tree preservation plan. 6 right where you're pointing at, that's 6, and then there's 1 on the far left, on the far right side. What we'd like to do, with your all permission, is we could take and grade that whole area at a 3-to-1 slope, starting on our property. But the developer's willing to rent a tree spade. Now, those trees are 10 to 21 inches in diameter. Rent a tree spade, we'll grade out the portion that's doesn't have any trees on it. Take a tree spade, dig a hole, go over to a tree, pick it, and plant it the same day. So we're not killing the tree, we're just relocating it. But we can grade that down at a 3-to-1 slope. I can lower that retaining wall from 32 feet down to 15 to 17 feet tall.
Better.
And we'll have to supplement it, that whole slope anyways, with the required plantings as required by the PCD. But we'll have these 7 large trees that do not die. And we'll put them and space them out, and we'll work with town staff to test exactly where they want them. But before we drew that and did that, we wanted your input and see if that, I mean, technically, I think we're meeting the criteria, but we want your blessing on it before we start. It would lower the height of the retaining wall. As you can see on the corner that when we first came in front of you, the corner in the southwest corner, right there behind the 3-story building, if you remember correctly, it was 34 feet tall. It's now down to 19 feet by grading an area at a 2.5-to-1 slope. Now we can lower that retaining wall. It'd be less obtrusive. We'll have a nice green area. We could landscape it really beautifully, meeting all the requirements. And we're not killing any of the trees we'll be preserving the trees that are still there.
I'm not sure that's something that the planning commission could give you permission to do at this point in time. I'm not exactly sure how that would fit into the tree ordinance, and that's a separate municipal ordinance, I believe. And
But, I mean-
I'm not sure who the appellate body would be for that. So if it required some sort of variance or that sort of thing,
We're not asking for a variance. We're meeting the requirement. We're not killing the trees. We're just relocating them.
That's
and
nice,
grading
but
the
I
area.
think it needs to be looked at in the context of the ordinance and whether or not, that would be workable or not. And I just don't think that's something the planning commission should be,
Success ratio.
That was my
commenting on at this
And that's
point.
why I wanted to, before we drew it all up and talked about, I wanted to get some feedback from you all as to first, do you think it's a good idea?
Well, I certainly think it's a good idea to lower the
Yeah.
height of that.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean, we can knock
I'm
the
with
walls in
Bart,
half.
though, as far as having it looked at from an ordinance standpoint.
And we're not
relocating
trying
the
to
trees.
skirt the ordinance. That is not our intention. We're trying to follow the ordinance, but also make a product that looks better for the environment. We're talking about literally picking a tree up and replanting it the same day and keeping the tree alive. What's the survival rate on that? 95%. They do it, let's put it this way, it's the same process that they do at the Masters down in Augusta, Georgia, the golf course. They move 30 to 35-inch trees every year.
No idea.
And all the trees survive. We're talking about the same process.
I'll
We'll
just
certainly
say,
evaluate it. I just don't
Yeah.
think we can speak to that.
I don't feel
right
comfortable
now.
making that
Well,
decision
no, I'm
tonight,
saying,
but-
if it does meet the requirements, do you all have any objection to it? I mean, we have to meet the ordinance. We're not trying to go around the ordinance. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I think
We
if
know
we're-
this is the most contentious thing that we're asking for you of tonight.
I don't speak for everybody, but I'd like to see, lower retaining walls as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
But however, I don't have any real feel. I'd like feedback from some professionals on that success ratio
Yep.
and that method. And also, it's one thing to do it up front, but I'm also, you're also going to have to maintain it over time.
Oh, yes.
And
No.
erosion does
No, I agree.
does happen.
No. And we're here to tell you,
So
we're
it's
not trying, like I said, we're
The
not
devil's in
trying
the
to kill
detail, and I
trees
guess we'd
either.
like to hear more of the detail.
Yeah, yes.
Pardon?
I'm with you.
The detail, I'd like to learn more about the detail
I
from the
understand.
professionals that look at
Okay.
that.
But if it does meet muster, y'all would be in favor of this, correct?
Well, I think generally is
The general idea, you're in favor of the idea, if we meet
get
muster
it
with
in
all
and
the
meet the
ordinance.
requirements and with a smaller retaining,
Yes.
shortened
Yes.
height retaining
Yes.
wall. I
Yes. Okay.
think that's wise.
That's what we're looking for, just some guidance from you. I understand what you're saying.
Massive retaining walls are
Not
a
attractive.
problem and are not attractive at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know if y'all have been out to the overlook, but the retaining wall that goes around the trailer park, they have that almost all in right now. What we're talking about is making a wall that looks like that, instead of one that's twice as tall. And not killing the trees that meet the tree preservation ordinance. Keep them alive, replant them the same day, and keep them in other words, just move them around so we can do the grading, so we can lower the height of the wall.
You're talking about moving
7 trees.
7 trees moving.
7. There's only 7 that meet the tree protection ordinance. And I agree, you can't, I'm not asking, I just want to make sure you all would be in favor of it if it does pass, and I agree with Bart. We need to submit it and put it in front of staff and make sure it passes muster. But before we did it, I want to make sure this is not something you're going to come back and go, oh my God, what did you do? Because this is a major change. This really is a major change to the plan.
Well, let me ask you this, if all of that works out and you're grading, what is planning on going there after you're done
All the
grading?
landscaping that's required. All the required, because now that we're moving some trees around, we're going to have to additionally plant in that area to meet the requirements, because behind us is a residential zone. So we have to meet the PCD requirements for buffering from a residential zone.
Okay.
Plus
As far
the-
as moving these trees, my concern is setting a precedent. I don't know if it's ever been done before, okay?
I've never even thought of it until we were brainstorming.
Bark about it.
Yeah, we have not. That's why we're
Okay.
bringing it here in front of you.
Then I think we're right here, that we need input to know
I
about.
totally
yeah.
agree,
All right.
100%.
I think the consensus here, obviously, is that we'd like to see the lower retaining wall. I don't
Yes.
think there's an issue there.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. That's it for my part. I'll let Mr. Hill speak.
My name is Robert M. Hill. I'm a resident 11504 Mountain View Road, Farragut, Tennessee, USA. I'm here to talk about what the applicant just talked about, and my recommendation was stated by Commissioner St. Clair. I didn't understand he was going to move 7 trees. I thought it was just 1, but this makes it even more realistic and necessary. But if I were the Planning Commission, I would require a certified arborist to look at what you're doing and make a plan ahead of time for the movement of the trees and get that arborist's opinion about whether those trees are going to live or not. Because transplanting trees in Knoxville, Tennessee or Farragut, Tennessee is not the same as transplanting trees in Augusta, not by a long shot. So that's what I would recommend you do before you make a decision at all on the trees.
I think that's a good idea.
And,
We have no problem with that.
and Bart, would there be some kind of landscape
There'd have to be some
money
kind of
for
a-
that matter, to,
I mean, again, I think we just have to, see how it fits into the tree protection ordinance, and then how that would relate to the landscaping ordinance and the relevant aspects of the PCD.
We agree. We're willing to work with y'all. I mean, this is kind of a out-of-the-box thinking here, folks. And that's one of the reasons I just want, I understand your concerns, and that's why we just wanted some input before we started proceeding down the road that you were going to say, oh, heck no on. So we will get our ducks in a row, and we'll be back. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're not going to bother you anymore. Do y'all want those? If you don't, I'll take them.
I'll keep them. I'll keep mine. Actually, you could hand us that to Ron Williams, he might want to see them.
Thank you again for your time and patience.
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 7 now. Six. Yeah. Discussion on a request to rezone parcel 84, 84.01, and 87, tax map 130 at the eastern intersection of North Campbell Station and Fritz Road, 10.13 acres from R1 to R1 OSR. Fred Law Construction Concepts applicant.
Okay, this is a rezoning request and out in the North Campbell Station Road and Fritz Road area. It includes 3 existing lots right now. They total approximately 10.23 acres. They'd like to go from rural single-family residential, which is R1, to the rural single-family open space overlay zone, so the OSR zone. The site is got some topography on it, as you can see here. There's some drainage issues. There's some steep grades on it. There's one little potential depression that I guess could be a sinkhole up in the, I guess it would be the northwest corner or section of the property, or in that vicinity. It doesn't really show up at this scale, but it's there if you zoom in closer. As you can see, the property there is fairly heavily wooded. The R1 OSR would be consistent with the future land use plan, and we think that it would also be fairly consistent, with the existing land use in the area, the zoning in the area, and the overall development pattern. And the OSR aspect would allow them to, better design around the site topography and the wooded nature. So it's a fairly reasonable rezoning request. I think it would be a good fit for the area. Of course, it's being workshopped tonight. It's just on here for discussion. I don't know
For
if there's
discussion
anyone here
only tonight.
for the request.
Does anybody have any questions for Bart to start with?
One other note is that, it would probably also require a sanitary sewer line extension. There's, or at least based on the KGIS data, there's not one immediately at the property, but there are sewer lines in the area. And I just say that because, typically the building sites are a little more clustered in the OSR overlay, and so in all likelihood you need to have sewer run in there.
Yes, I'm Richard LeMay. I'm the engineer representing the developer. And he's described what we want pretty well. The reason we're asking for this is so we can cluster the lots. They're going to be detached houses, but this will allow us to keep the same density and move away from some of those sensitive areas. And I wish I had some exhibits to show you, but I don't have anything. Just follow that act.
Do you guys know how many lots do you want to put in there?
22.
Okay. Which is the allowable amount? That's the.
That is, yes.
Yeah.
And staff would also probably want to see the lots put together into a single track as, part of the rezoning as well.
Okay.
So, but,
What's the downside, Bart, is there any?
I think it's a good fit for the property. It's got some topographic challenges. It's a wooded site. The surrounding area is a mix of various density residentials. It's there at the edge of the town, so some of those properties that you see are actually out in Knox County, but there's some higher density residential development that's been done in that area. In terms of attached single family, there's some more scattered single family development. The zoning pattern is again a mix between Farragut zoning and Knox County zoning, but some of those areas out there are zoned in the county as planned residential of various densities. That's that PR zoning. I think that's a county designation. And then there's some of your R2. There's some agricultural zoning out there. So it's a mix of different density, single family type residential, and we think it fits in the area and it fits with the property.
Are you guys do you know where you're going to access from, Fretz or Campbell Station?
Fretz.
Or Fretz? And I'm looking at, it faces, a portion of it is on Campbell Station. I assume we'll need some of that right away and construction of sidewalk, or?
There could be a need for some, some additional dedication. Right now, we were just looking at the rezoning itself.
Okay, I understand.
When they came
Yep.
in with an
Yep.
actual subdivision plat,
Yep.
we'd have to cross those bridges.
Okay.
Currently, we're looking at the possibility of, there's a house on that lot that fronts Campbell Station. We may exclude that from this development if that's possible, not included in our acreage that we're developing for the subdivision. That was not one of the 22 lots I mentioned earlier. So that's one possibility we're looking at, is keeping that house on that lot.
Including it as part of the whole development,
It'll
so
be
that,
part of the whole development. right?
okay, yeah.
Approximately where is that?
I think
It's the second house from the intersection with Fritz
Oh,
Road,
okay, those
back
are
toward
those are
Farragut.
houses.
Okay, that one.
Okay, okay.
I could
If you
switch
do
over to
that,
the aerial. It might.
Ms.
might be able to
LeMay,
see
if
it
you
better on
do
the aerial.
that, you would not use that access that's there now for this.
No, the access will come off Fritz Road. What this rezoning does, it doesn't increase our density at all. What it does is allow us to save some of the trees and stay out of some of those areas that are not sensitive, but they're not very developable either. So it helps everybody to keep
Yeah.
those as open space and develop the part that we can.
And this is for discussion purposes only tonight.
Yes.
So, anybody else have any questions or comments?
It seems reasonable to me.
Just to me.
Appreciate it.
So will you be back next month, or is it a little bit farther along? Well, he's gone now, so. So we're moving on now to item number 8, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for the Brass Lantern subdivision, parcel 012, tax map 162, 801 McPhee Road, 22 acres, 30 lot, zone R-1, OSR, pending.
minute, did we miss one?
Homestead Landing LLC.
We missed one?
7 should be on, yeah, you may
Seven?
have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was the one we just discussed, isn't it?
Yeah, that was
No,
6.
this is
Okay.
the one we just discussed.
Another one from North Campbell Station, okay. Discussion on a request to rezone parcel 93.01, tax map 130 off North Campbell Station Road, 7.6 acres from R-2 to R-4, site incorporated applicant. And this is also for discussion only, is that correct, Bart?
Yes.
Okay.
This is another rezoning request. It's in the same general area. It's actually just a few parcels down from the property that you were just looking at. It's also on the I guess southwest side of North Campbell Station Road there, or the south side because of the curve in the road. It's approximately 7.6 acres. They want to go from R2, which is general single-family residential, to R4, which is for attached single-family residential. The property fronts for approximately 675 feet on North Campbell Station Road. The R4 would not currently be consistent with the future land use plan, so the zoning would require an amendment to that plan. The plan right now calls for that area to be very low-density residential. But at the same time that, the R4 could serve as a transition area between that property there and the commercially zoned property, that's immediately to the south there. It would also be fairly consistent, again, with, the existing development pattern in the area and some of the other zoning around it, which is that same mix of residential development at various densities. So it's from a land use sort of consistency standpoint, it's not unreasonable. It would also, I think, fit in the area. From that standpoint, it would require a plan amendment. Probably the biggest issue with this, and I don't know if anyone is here for this project, is that the R4 zoning, specifically in the district, requires access from a street that meets the minimum design standards. And right now, that section of North Campbell Station Road does not. So any rezoning would have to be conditioned on improvements. They'd probably have to do a lane widening. They'd have to add a curb and gutter section and also, the pedestrian facilities. And that would be in addition to any infrastructure, they'd have to put into the property. So I don't know whether there's someone here for it, and if they're, we're aware of that requirement, but this property also doesn't have sewer that's immediately available, but it is in the area, so that would have to be extended also.
Grant Berry with Site Incorporated, 10215 Technology Drive, Knoxville.
So are you aware of both the road situation and the sewer?
We're aware of the utilities. I don't believe we were aware of the road situation.
When we talk about that road, what is, if in our dream world, Campbell Station Road ever gets widened, what do we think it would be widened to? 12-foot lanes, curb and gutter, or?
That I don't really know. I'd want to talk to the town attorney on that. I know it's, that it, right now it's, the way it's classified, it as a minor arterial in that section, it doesn't meet our current standards for that in terms of lane width, and then in terms of the curb and gutter detail and any pedestrian facilities along it. So,
You mean for the R4
yeah,
zone?
yeah, and the R4 zone.
For the R2?
It's well, I mean, it's currently zoned R2, but
They could,
in order to get to R4, one of the specific requirements in the zone is that the property has to access a street that meets current
But
standards.
that's not true for R2.
they could develop at R2. It's
Yeah.
currently zoned that.
Right. And so your preference why is it you're wanting to change to R4?
Because of the R4 allowing the attached townhome type residential development.
So I'm assuming that you think you'll make more money with the R4 than the R2, is that right?
As the engineer, I don't want to make a difference either way, but the developer, that is their preference, yes.
So how many more residents will there be on this property from a 2 to a 4?
You could go from, what is it, 7.5? And you have to have 10% open space. You asked a tough question there.
Probably 15 to 20.
15 to 20, okay.
That's just
I didn't hear you.
15-ish possibly.
15 for the
Additional,
R4?
over, and an
or-
increase.
Oh, increase of,
That's a ballpark.
from R2 to R4?
Yes. It's only a 7-acre property, so.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is the North Campbell Station on any road improvement plan?
A section of it is actually being improved by another developer that's doing a project out in the county, and it's in the area, the intersection of Fritz Road and North Campbell Station. But I did check that with Darrell, and he doesn't think it extends down all the way to this property. So
They're widening to make a
It would have
turn
been
lane?
nice if it was, would have encompassed this, this property, and then they'd essentially get a free ride on that project. But that's not the case, or doesn't appear to be the case. So I mean, from staff's perspective, in terms of the land use plan and consistency in the area, it's not unreasonable to consider the R4 zoning and amending the land use plan. But all of that would have to be conditioned on some mechanism in place to, to see the infrastructure improvements on Campbell Station Road. And I guess that, that'll ultimately be a decision for the developers to whether they can bear that cost or not.
I talked to Darrell earlier this week. We're talking about something else and problems that Ridgeland was having, and talked to him about the possibility of North Campbell Station Road being improved. And he said he had researched that long ago through TPO, but really the only way to really improve North Campbell Station Road is to do it from the highway straight on over to Hardin Valley. And at the time, Knox County wasn't very amenable to that. But now with Hardin Valley exploding, they may need to address that because they're really struggling with that going north to south. But Campbell Station, well, as you well know, especially in the county side, it's rock on one side and it's perilous cliff on the other. And I can't see how we'll ever expand it beyond maybe 2 12-foot lanes. I don't know how you do much more than that.
And the development in the Knox County section is really taken off over, just in the Campbell Station area.
Yeah, just in that area.
Not even considering Hardin Valley.
We did, and I'll tell you, we did add into our budget extending to a CIP budget, extending from Snyder Road down to where it becomes 2 lanes down by the highway. We're going to, I asked for them to amend and put that CIP in there to get into the right of way and put 2 lanes there, so that coming off of Snyder Road, you're going to have 2 lanes there. Of course, that will help with stacking on North Campbell Station Road as well. But that doesn't resolve their issue that's coming up here. So,
It's going the other way, right?
yes.
Anybody else have any questions or comments this
No,
time?
my only comment would be I don't think I'm really favoring changing it from the R2 to an R4 because I'm not really buying into the transition to the commercial because when you look at the R1 and R2 around that now and look at the impacts up in that, I mean, you got the Ridgeland folks too down the road there that the long-term commitment. That subdivision's been there a while too.
We're seeing a big
And
development
we can't
here.
control everything on the other side.
Yeah.
But we can control that side, and I would hate to see us kind of shoehorn R4 in there.
Agree with Ed.
Any more questions or comments? So this has been for discussion only tonight. We'll move on now to item number 8, discussion and public hearing on preliminary plat for the Brass Lantern subdivision, parcel 012, tax map 162, 801 McPhee Road, 22 acres, 30 lots, zoned R-1, OSR pending, Homestead Land Holdings LLC applicant.
This is a preliminary subdivision plat request for the Brass Lantern subdivision. You heard the concept plan at the last meeting and approved that, subject to several conditions. It's an approximately 30-acre, or I should say 30-lot subdivision with a single cul-de-sac and a significant amount of platted open space. Toggle over there. Currently the property is currently in the process of being rezoned to R1 OSR. I believe that's had first reading, so that's before the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and it'll be coming up for second reading at the next meeting. They have a walking trail connection that extends from McPhee Manor to the north down through the development and then accesses McPhee Park to the south, and they've been coordinating with town staff to make sure that access point at McPhee Park will work with the park improvements that are going on. Staff can recommend approval subject to all the comments that you have in front of you being satisfactorily addressed. I don't know if there's any question on any of those from the applicant or any of you all. And again, it'll of course have to be pending the zoning being finalized.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Got some other slides if you're interested in looking at them. There's some on the landscaping they're doing along the detention basins and at the street frontage, and also on some of the landscape islands that are part of their traffic calming streetscaping plan.
Are you all okay with the, well, go ahead and
Yeah.
tell us who you are first, and then I'll ask my question.
Russ Rackley with Rackley Engineering here representing the applicant. We're fine with all 9 conditions. Most of them are minor drafting cleanup stuff, and we don't have a problem with that.
Okay, good. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
Move for approval of preliminary plat for Brass Lantern subdivision, parcel 102, subject to the 9 stipulations.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Item number 9, discussion and public hearing on preliminary plat for Phase 1 of Brookmere subdivision of Virtue Road, parcels 22 and 44, tax map 152 and 152F, 87.70 acres, 90 lots, zoned R-1, OSR pending, Luce and Associates Incorporated.
This is a preliminary plat for Phase 1 of Brookmere subdivision, formerly the, Harville property off Virtue Road. It's zoned R1 OSR that's been finalized now. The concept plan for the project was conditionally approved in March of this past year. This current phase is for 90 lots out of approximately 142, I believe, is what was on the original concept. It also includes most of the streetscaping elements, the boulevard area, and 63 out of the 87 total acres. So it's a fairly large Phase 1. It's a good chunk of the development. You have our comments there in front of you in terms of things that we think that it needs to be approved subject to if that's the board's pleasure. They are requesting a variance for some design speed issues on some curves. That's one thing that does need to be discussed, and you probably need to either take take separate action on that if you again have a mind to deal with that. We can talk about that. I don't know if you have any other questions on any of the other comments, or if the applicants have any questions on any of the other comments, and then maybe we can circle back to the variance, unless you want to do that on the front end.
We can go ahead and address the variances if you'd like. I'll be happy to speak to those or answer any questions regarding them.
Let's go ahead and do that.
Sure.
Start with the variance and.
What we're asking for is to reduce the required design speed for vertical road design on primarily 3 locations. Part of this is due to the effort to save the trees in the center, and then to save the trees around the perimeter is kind of dictating the overall grade across the site. Currently, your subdivision regulations require a vertical design speed of 35 miles an hour. However, your horizontal road criteria in your regulations is equivalent to about a 22 mile an hour design speed. So we're asking, and I believe a letter from Los Engineering was, or Los and Associates was included in your packet that defines the locations where we're wanting to request the crest and sag K values to be equivalent with a 25 mile an hour design speed. In 3 locations, and in 1 location on Kendall Hunt Lane to 20 miles an hour. This, again, the effort in doing this is trying to make the grade work across the site. We also see it, I think Mark even commented in our meetings that you ask us for traffic calming and to do things to slow people down, and sometimes a narrow, crooked road will do that as well. In this case, they're not that crooked. But for instance, one of the roads that we're asking for a variance on is Justice Valley Road is the loop road in the center at the head of the boulevard. So you've got 3 closely spaced intersections that are tied to the existing tree grades, and then we're having to tie into a road in Phase 2 that have lots that back up to a wooded 25-foot buffer, so we're pinned at that grade. So we're limited on what we can do vertically without getting into the trees. And so that's why we've asked for the variance, and we feel confident that the variance won't impede the ability to navigate these roads or any kind of safety issues.
Can you specifically on here point out the crests and swags that you're requesting?
I can on the plan and profile, if you want to look at the plan and profile sheets.
I don't know if that's in here, Russ.
Okay.
I don't think it is, to be
I'm
honest
not
with
sure
you.
if there's, have you got anything with road stations on it?
I don't, I'm toggling
overall
through real
road
quick. I don't think those were put in. In the comments that y'all had, and I think Mark sent you a set of that. Daryl's comment, Daryl, the town engineer's comment is number 14 on the staff comments and recommendations. I spoke to him briefly about these, as much as I, can as not being an engineer. It's not really my bailiwick there, but he is he's opposed to any of the variances on the sags, or I should say on the crest vertical curves. Generally he's not flat out opposed to some of the sag vertical curves, although he questions some of them, and as to whether they're needed. He's also to some extent okay with the lower design speed at the stop conditions, which would be intersections. And the crest vertical curves he's really not comfortable with at this point. And he questioned why they were needed on some of the sags. His thinking was that it might be best for the applicants to meet with him and to go over each one of those and try to justify it and put together a list that the exact areas that they would be on, so that they could be voted on either individually or as a group for pro and con.
With all due respect, we did that with the submittal package. We've listed station 4+50 to 6+00 on Needlegrass, which is the main road coming in. That location is where we do the bridge crossing, so we're crossing through the floodplain. So we're trying to minimize the amount of fill, because the higher we fill the road on either side of the bridge, the wider we have to clear trees around the creek to tie that in at a 3-to-1 slope. So we've reduced that vertical curve when you cross the bridge going up. That also happens to be where we've got a horizontal curve that is 150-foot radius, which again meets your subdivision regulations, but is a 22-mile-an-hour design speed per AASHTO horizontal curvature guidelines. So to us, having a variance for the vertical curve that matches the design speed of your regulation horizontal curve doesn't seem like a big reach to ask for. The other location is on the entirety of Kendall Hunt Drive, which is the short road at the head of the long road to the left. That's right, to the northwest. That road where we drop off, again, the boulevard road being pinned by the ground elevation at the drip edge of all those maples that we're trying to save, and maples and dogwoods that we're trying to save. So we're pinned at that location at the elevation of the road, but we have to be able to drop down to get closer to natural grade, because we can't, with the creek behind us, fill 60 feet to keep the road flat. So we have to dip down and then work back up the road. Some of it has to do with drainage too, of trying to place drainage, the low spot in the road in the right locations, not in the center of the front of a lot, but on a lot line, so that we can run pipes to get the drainage out to the pond. And then the other area is, as I mentioned earlier, Justice Valley, which is the U-shaped road on your plan that ties into the top of the boulevard section. And again, that's a road that begins and ends at an intersection in Phase 2, which again is a road that's being dictated vertically by the tree buffer between us and Sugarwood. By the elevation of those trees, we can only cut and lower the lots so much. And then in the middle of that loop road, we have the boulevard intersection and then another third intersection off the center of that. So all those grades and keeping those intersections flat and tying into the grades around the trees in the center boulevard section is what's controlling all that. So, we discussed this at the staff developer meeting, and the engineers went back and worked very hard to eliminate a lot of the other situations where we would have needed a variance. And we've narrowed it down to these areas where we are hemmed in with grades to make the project work, needing a variance from your subdivision regulations for vertical curves.
Well, if you lower or you approve the variance to lower the speed, what's the likelihood that the traveler's going to actually abide by that speed? Is it going to be really dangerous if they don't?
In my opinion, no more so than any other road in Farragut or Knox County. Most subdivision streets are the difference in the rate of curvature, which to get into the minutia that you speak of earlier, it's the rate at which you go from one grade to another, whether that's up and up or up and down or down and up. By lengthening or shortening those curves, the amount we're talking about doing it, being in a residential subdivision, isn't that great. It would be different if you were on Virtue Road or Kingston Pike. But in a neighborhood, I know people drive too fast in neighborhoods as it is, but in a neighborhood you can't out-engineer inconsiderate people. You just can't beat them. No matter what we do, we could put speed bumps through here and the city would be getting calls about mufflers laying in the road from people hitting them going 50. But
in the vicinity of where you're requesting the variances, is there going to be a greater risk of people running into the yards or homes alongside there?
No. The horizontal changes, the horizontal design meets all of your regulations. It's just the vertical that we're talking about. So it really has to do with how far you can see in front of you if you're going up over a crest. But we don't have any situations where we're going up steep and down steep, right? Most of it is where the road's working its way up or you're coming off an intersection down. There's not a situation, even though it's called a crest curve, where we're coming up at 10% and down at 10%, and it's really a blind curve. That's why we don't feel like that it's that big of an issue. It's
I understand.
Well, let me
hilly,
ask
but
you
not quite
this.
as much as Kingsgate.
Let me ask you this, just because I'm a visual person, I'm trying to visualize this. Where you're asking for these exceptions, I'm going to throw out a question that might be really stupid. You're coming over for a vertical, driveways coming out. Are you designing to know this location, this is where we've asked for a variance from this, and we might have an issue here of conflict because of they need to be going slower here. Are you envisioning, is where you place your driveways important when you're doing this for cars that might be coming out as cars are coming up?
It could be in more severe situations, but I don't think we have any opposing grades here that would dictate that.
Okay.
And by opposing grades, I mean, again, going up and down, where your sight distance is completely limited by that curve. Most places we're going up and over or up and down slightly. We're not having that severity. But definitely, we've not obviously picked floor plans for all these lots yet, but that's always a consideration where we place driveways of where we can get them in.
Okay.
So, again, I would not ask for a variance if I thought it was a safety issue. Wouldn't do it. This isn't out of convenience. This is the constraints of the property and the constraints of the Farragut regulations. And primarily, we can make it all go away, but if we took all the maples out of the middle of it and just graded everything. And so we're spending a lot of time and effort and money to save those, and it's creating these trickle-down problems where we're needing to ask for these 3 variances on road design. The rest of the comments we're fine with. We have no objection. Again, most of them are housekeeping issues that we can get straightened out with staff. This is really the only issue that we need.
So there's no problem with the crest and the sight distance?
Well,
No, I don't see there being a problem with that at all. It does reduce, obviously, your rate of vertical curvature does affect your sight distance, but being in a subdivision setting, it's not going to change it that much. The difference between your requirement of a 35-mile-an-hour design speed and what we're requesting is a small step. It's not like we're going from a 65-mile-an-hour curve to a 25-mile-an-hour curve, right? We're going one step down on the AASHTO chart for allowable K values.
But again, in speaking with the town engineer, that is his concern, is a sight distance on the crest vertical curves. So.
You and Darrell had a direct discussion on that?
Yeah, we did at the staff developer meeting.
So that did occur then?
Yeah, and he expressed his opinion, and we said we would go back, and originally we really were looking for a variance on the whole subdivision to make, because it was easier to, I shouldn't say easier, it made the grading and design work better with the slopes and tie-in slopes and tree clearing and all that. But we went back and revised everything and tried to eliminate all of them. But we got down to these 3 areas. If I could read a little bit from Mark Shipley's report that's in your packet, he actually states that the variance from the subdivision regulation would allow us to lower the street design speeds. This would aid in traffic calming and lessen grading in certain locations. This variance will need to be acted on separately prior to voting on the preliminary plat. So I know Mark's not here, but I think he kind of sees some of the reasons behind what we're asking for.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? And you're okay with the rest of the
Yes.
subject twos?
Yep.
I'll say I'm not real comfortable with going against what Darrell was concerned about with these crest and the dips, but the roads are kind of straight where some of these are, and that I'm afraid speed is going to pick up regardless of what we have it listed to be. I think most of us know what happens in any roadway where you have a 25-mile-an-hour speed. Nobody's going to go 25 miles an hour.
Well, I will, but
Yeah, I do as well.
let me ask you this, and I'm going to throw it out there, because your neighborhood may want it if they're dealing with that. We talked about speed bumps. Is that something you would put, and you can't put that in a location where you've got crests and correct?
No, generally you would, well, you can put those vertical traffic calmings pretty much anywhere, but you would back off of from a sag or a crest and put them in straightaways where most people, it's human nature to slow down through a dip or a rise. It's just human nature to let off there.
Yeah.
So usually it's the flat, straight sections where foot gets heavy and it gets away from them a little bit.
Well, I'd hate to see us creating, on the crest in particular, a situation where you get even a straight section where you could have a driveway just over the crest or on the crest, or people, that may be there temporarily for a while. They park there because somebody's doing something at their house and they got to be out of the garage, or so they park on the street momentarily. I've seen and personally experienced situations like that where it's extremely dangerous, 20 or 25 miles an hour either one, because just purely the sight distance. If it comes down to a few trees in a location versus that sight distance, trees lose, in my opinion. I'm talking about that one location,
Which one?
the one at between Station 4+50 to Station 6 on Needle Grass.
Oh, that's where we're talking about the requiring fill.
Over the
Is that-
bridge, right?
But just the crest problems are
Yeah.
problematic to me.
Well, that's actually a side curve there.
And there's no houses there.
No,
And
no, that would be a sag going across the bridge. You start up the other side, so that's that transition from the bridge being relatively flat to going up the hill and then around the corner.
And you don't have anything that you could point out where these places are to us?
No, I don't have the stations on what was put in the PowerPoint. But I mean,
I was just looking at
you know,
Daryl's
Drawings right
even with
there.
them, I'm not in a position
It was
to,
obviously
recommend
Daryl's
something,
note.
contrary to what the town engineer is recommending.
I'm sorry, he was talking to, what was it, Commissioner?
Well, I was just reading from Daryl's note, but maybe I misread it.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions or comments, either for the staff or the applicant?
Can you show me, you have the drawings, can you show us where I don't know how you say that, 4+50 station, and is that how you say it?
Yeah.
How do you-
6+0.
Yeah,
Six, okay.
4+50 and 6+00.
Okay.
What we have is so small, you can't hardly,
Yeah, you can't see.
What's that?
you can't pick up the station information very well on this small.
Okay.
But the crest is fine. We're asking for the variance on the sag.
Okay. And where is this on that?
Right here. Right as we cross the bridge.
Right after you cross the bridge.
There's no houses there, so. Is this a developer?
Yeah, that's the first lot right there.
Okay.
So the sag's right there.
Okay, what about the others?
Right. You'll be able to see fine. We're going up to up, so it's not, again,
Yeah,
it's not like we're.
you're not coming, you just gotta, yeah.
Show them the Kindle. That's right here and right here. And that's the crossing road between the boulevard, the mid-block crossing between the boulevard.
Okay, that's what that
Right.
is.
So that's what's starting the
Okay.
elevations. And
Okay.
then- And then we come out of that intersection and start down.
Okay, it goes down, and then it,
So
then
it's
it,
primarily sag, and then we're going from 7% flattening out to 1.16. So there's your crest, which is in, yeah, but it's still up.
where does it start going up on this? Does it start going up?
This is the low spot between these two houses, and after that we climb all the way up to the end.
starts going up from here. So this sag around 7 plus 25 would be
Okay.
roughly in this area right here, from about there to there.
Where's this first point?
So that's 975-ish. Yeah, so you're right here.
Right there.
Yeah, right in this area right here. But again, still, we're talking about a total length of curve. It's a 100-foot curve. So it's not like the grades are so much that it's a 350-foot curve and we're asking for a 100-foot curve. If we crank that up to K of 25, then it would be, 160-foot curve. So that's why I say, in my opinion, it's not that great of a change because we're not going from up to down.
Yeah.
We're going from up to not up quite as fast.
Yeah,
And
I
so
see.
it's, yeah,
So your vision isn't, your line of sight isn't.
right.
So have you adjusted this since you had the staff developer meeting?
Oh,
Or-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We had the two boulevard roads much closer to grade, and we adjusted them to flatten out the curves. Cut a little bit more near the tree. It's a lot.
Daryl has seen this plan.
It was submitted.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he reviewed the resubmittals and his comment is based on, whatever was resubmitted and looked at. So, I mean,
14 is after
yes, yes, ma'am.
Then can,
This is the road that, the other road.
Justice Valley.
Yeah, Justice Valley, and as you see, we're tying in, we've got the two boulevard roads here.
Yeah.
Which is, 700, 800. So 700.
That's this one right here.
so you haven't talked with Daryl after you submitted these then?
No, only his comments that we received, this morning.
These?
Yeah, these comments that we received this morning.
Okay.
So that's this intersection right here. We've got this road tying in. This comes around and eventually extends up, ties into this road, all three of these. And then this road backs up to Sugarwood with the 25-foot buffer.
Yeah.
So we can only cut those lots down so far and get this road in, and then that's kind of what's driving everything, but we got to hit this down here too.
To meet these.
But if you see, we've got a crest here that's going down at 1.1 and then down at 7.5.
So as a point of clarity, though, that Daryl's comments are based on this set of plans. It's not the preceding set of plans. So he did look at them, and they did only get the comment this morning because he was looking at them.
Have you reviewed
Yesterday,
his
but-
comments then?
Yes.
Are there some merits to these, his questions? Do you think you can satisfactorily reply to him?
Well, to answer why we're, I
Yeah.
can answer his questions, yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. But we're still
But you'd stick
requesting
with
the
this?
variance.
Yeah, you still would stick with it? You wouldn't change anything?
So you have visibility from here, I'm looking at that intersection. You have visibility from that and that. I guess that's my main concern, is that you have your visibility and your visibility coming down from Sandy Run.
Yeah, well, this,
People,
right.
do you have stop sign, what
Yeah,
is this?
Sandy Run will have a stop sign.
So this will have a stop sign
Yeah.
here.
And
What
these-
about
These roads will have a stop sign.
Boyd Chase and
Well,
will,
coming up the boulevard will have a stop sign, obviously, this is an out only.
and Justice Valley will be free,
Yeah.
no stop sign?
I don't know, as of right now, yeah, we've not really talked about that, since that is a through road. A loop road. Even if you put a stop sign. I mean, generally you wouldn't
Yeah,
put a stop
because it's
sign,
the-
yeah. Yeah.
Be going to here, to here.
That'd be going down. And we do have the crosswalk striping.
Oh, is this, are these one way?
Yeah.
Is this one way?
Yeah.
Okay, that's
This
one
one
way
way
going
up.
up.
This is one way down. So this is your boulevard. And
Okay.
we've got all the crosswalk hatching where we've got the sidewalk.
Yeah.
The Greenway Trail going down the middle. So, I mean, this area is gonna have enough
So
paint on it
usually people are gonna be coming here, they're gonna be slowing down to go
to go
here
here.
anyway.
Yep. And these people will be coming down to go here, and then these people will be going any more in three directions.
So this is really the key point of visibility for, because that's where you're gonna have traffic
Right,
moving. to
right.
go out
It's
of
gonna be
the-
a left turn, and then this is gonna be coming uphill for a right turn primarily. And at that point, I believe that you're gonna have ample side distance. That's 10, that's 9, so you're just short of 9. Yeah, so you're, well, you got it marked right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, you're actually past, that intersection is actually past the vertical curve by almost 50 feet, so about 40 feet. So you're 40 feet past the point of vertical tangency where it goes back into a
Okay.
tangent section
Yeah.
before the intersection.
Okay.
So the only intersection in the curve is actually this stop intersection right here.
And people are gonna be slowing down to have to make that turn anyway.
Yeah.
Art, is there any merit in us taking these points, variances, one at a time, as opposed to all of them at once?
Yeah, I mean, if there's some that, that you feel like you want to support and others not, then, then obviously that would be the
That's a
way to go about
possibility
it.
to do that. Okay.
But,
So that's a possibility if anybody has any questions, and then we can,
This one again, because I'm pretty comfortable with this one. Being that this is one way and one way.
Which one are you talking about, Louise?
The Justice Valley Street. I'm pretty comfortable with that one because of the flow of traffic. Yeah. To me, anyway, I feel okay with that one. Remind me of this one again. This one was the Kendall Hunt.
Right. And we've got two crests on it, one at the intersection, which he said he was okay with. And then we've got the other crest back here at the
Okay,
back.
so the intersection he's okay with.
Yeah,
So it's this one that he questions.
this
And-
crest back here.
And
yeah.
what does he say he would rather you see? He'd rather see.
He wants 35 mile an hour, which is okay. What's 35? 27. Crest of 27, so instead of 18, 27, so you're basically, is that 50% increase? So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And it seems like, well, why don't you just change it? Well, when we change it and we've got a 6-foot grass strip and a 5-foot sidewalk, and then we've got a tie-in down here at the buffer, at the property line.
Yeah.
And then we're tying into these lots and trying to get a swell, and then everything just starts.
Degrees of freedom.
Yeah, you change one thing and everything just starts blowing up
Okay.
through, so. Again, we wouldn't be asking for it if, A, we didn't know it was necessary, and B, we wouldn't ask for it if we felt uncomfortable with it. I mean, as licensed engineers, we can't, we don't do things just
To do them,
feel like
just for the yucks of
yeah.
it.
Because he said in the meeting, he said in his comments, SAGs he wasn't that worried about, and in these scenarios, I mean, these are very broad SAGs. I mean, I don't see an issue with those at all, and this crest is at an intersection, you don't have a stop sign, you've got
Yeah.
plenty of queue.
Yeah.
We could actually lengthen this out, but we would eliminate the flat spot at the stop sign, which we think is important to have the flat spot.
and those might be things that you could discuss with Darrell and, to try to mitigate some of those things. But again, I mean, he's an engineer and can weigh those things.
Yeah. His comments, he was clear, he wasn't concerned about at stop control.
Intersections.
Yeah, at intersections.
And none of these are affected by driveways, is that?
This one will be, the Kendall Hunt one will be. This one, I think I'm comfortable with too. I mean, we have that's gonna be a dwelling unit, right?
Yeah.
Which one is this one?
The needle grass is, I'm semi-comfortable with because of, it's coming right out of the neighborhood. There's not a bunch of houses there, but the houses are pretty close. It's hard to tell from here.
Yeah, I'm good with that one.
But this Kendall Hunt one is the last tough one to get over. That's because I hate questioning Daryl. Daryl is,
Yeah.
what is, and what, you keep referring back to ASHTO. What are the ASHTO recommendations? You said this is a degree down. What does that mean?
Well, meaning going from your requirement of a 35-mile-an-hour
Yeah.
speed to a 25-mile-an-hour speed allows lower K
K
values,
values.
which is rate of vertical curvature. So
Okay.
you take this minus this, multiply it by K, and that tells you what your length of curve is supposed to be.
Okay.
So by taking that from a K of 18 to a K of 27, then to get out a calculator and do the math and tell you what that curve would be, but roughly it would be making, instead of a 100-foot vertical curve, it would be like a 160-foot vertical curve.
Oh, okay.
So it would stretch it out just a little bit and bring this down just a little bit.
I see.
But
Then again,
it's not significant.
fixed point
Yeah.
back
I see what you're saying.
But once you do that, then lay it out. That's for
And it's between these 2 points that we're concerned about, or what are the points we're talking about?
Well, our variance is for the whole road.
Okay.
But in Daryl's comments, he said he wasn't as concerned about sags,
Yeah.
rather,
Yeah.
that crest were his problems. And
Okay.
I get it, but again, if this grade were going that way, then it would be a big deal to ask
Yeah.
for a reduction. But the
Okay.
fact that we're just coming up and leveling off, the difference, there might be 5 feet of difference in sight distance, which, yeah, that could be important to people who are breaking the law to begin with. But
Yeah.
no matter how flat you make it, you're going to
You're
have
gonna have a
this.
problem.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's like the person that almost hit me walking my dog this morning.
I'm comfortable with these,
Thank you.
but that's me. I don't know how you guys feel.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments at this point? Want to make a motion? Does it-
Do we want to just do them all together? Move to approve a variance from, what am I getting a variance from?
Well, they
Lower
They
design?
submitted a letter that you should have in your packet here.
At lower design speed on selected
Russ, you got a
portions of the
copy there?
roadway.
Oh, okay, show me where, yeah.
You got a letter that looks like
The variance described, number 14.
There it is. Thank you. All right, that all belongs in the same motion?
Yep.
Okay.
And everything else, point-wise here, you're okay with?
Yes, yep.
Okay, I'm going to do the variance first. I move for a variance to lower the design speed at intersections to 25 miles per hour. Sag K equals 26, crest K equals 12. Lower the design speed in the following locations to 25 miles per hour from station 4+50 to 6+00 on Needlegrass. The entirety of Kendall Hunt to 25 miles per hour with station 3+00 to 5+50 to 20 miles per hour in the entirety of Justice Valley to 25.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Is that nettle grass or needle grass?
Nettle. Is it needle or nettle?
Needle,
Sorry, it's spelled wrong.
I think.
I thought it was nettle.
Maybe I'm
Thought
reading
it
it
was
wrong.
needle grass
Prickly
on
question.
Moon.
So
is
that's the
middle grass.
variance.
That's the
That's the
variance.
Needle.
So any more questions or comments on the other points? Then do I have a motion on the other points?
Move for approval of the preliminary plat for Phase 1 of Brookmere subdivision as described, with the incorporation of also item number 14 in the variance previously voted on.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no, thank you for your time.
Educating us.
In discussion and public hearing on the site plan for Grigsby Chapel offices, 11416 Grigsby Chapel Road, 8.68 acres, zone O-1-3, OS-P and FPD G&G Grigsby Chapel Partnership applicant.
This is a site plan request for Grigsby Chapel offices. What they're looking to do here is to add a proposed office building to the property that's located there at the corner of Grigsby Chapel Road and North Campbell Station Road. They're adding the building to a site that already contains a medical office building. You click here. This is the existing property now as it exists. There's, I think when that was originally approved, it was a St. Mary's medical building, and it, I guess, converted over to Nova at some point, and I'm not sure now, but I think a number of you are familiar with the site. It was originally developed in the late 1990s. There is, or you can see there on the western edge of the property, the North Fork of Turkey Creek runs through a portion of the property and then parallels the property. There's some regulatory floodplains that are also associated with that, and also a section of Grigsby Chapel Greenway runs through the property in an easement. The new development is going to be integrated into the existing site. It involves, I don't know if I have a shot that shows it real well, but after the development occurred, they separated out the existing building with a land lease line, and they also put in some other easements for access, and also access and parking in various locations. So they're integrating this, this expansion of the site into the existing development with those easements. This involves the new building and some additional parking that's going in. They also want to relocate a section of the greenway. That will require replatting that easement, and as part of the replatting process, they'll also have to dedicate a little bit of right-of-way there on Grigsby Chapel Road. They're aware of that. That did not make it into the comments and recommendations, so that's an additional note that should be part of the motion. If you are so inclined to, to approve this, subject to staff comments and recommendations on that. Yeah, that would be number 19. It's noted in the write-up, but it didn't get into the actual list of comments and recommendations.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make sure that got in. I think you can see under the discussion, it's the last two sentences under the discussion in the write-up. Don't know if there are any questions on any of the comments that we have in there. If there are, I'll be happy to address them.
Can I just get the point that we need to, is it just, the final note is dedication of right-of-way?
Well, they'll, if they're going to relocate a section of the greenway is currently within a platted easement, so that easement will have to be replatted and moved on the property. And because of that, they'll be, in a re-subdivision and a replatting situation. And it turns out there's a little bit of property, or a section of Grigsby Chapel Road there doesn't have the full right-of-way width, so they'd have to dedicate a little additional right-of-way there on Grigsby Chapel, which is fairly typical. It's the same thing that the dentist's office had to do that was here earlier, and that sort of.
Just near Grigsby Chapel where the relocation would be?
No, actually the relocation is, let's see if I can find one that'll, it would be a fairly good section that, I can't quite make out the notes, but I think it's from somewhere in here to somewhere down in here. Right now, the easement runs very straight, and so they'll be moving that easement. So they'll
Putting some curvature in it?
Yeah, in that area, they would have to go in and move the easement to accommodate where they want to move the greenway to do the project. And that movement is a result of the additional parking and the building and some of the grade work that they'll have to do in there.
I don't see any detriment to that, do you?
No, I mean, we're not opposed to that. It's just a matter of having it properly platted and done.
What about item number 11? Please revisit the sidewalk tie-in just north of the northernmost.
Yeah, that was an issue that came up, and that we were. Let me clear that. Hello. No, for some reason, this thing doesn't want to work. Let me go back to one that better shows the parking. Okay. There was some concern by town staff that this area up here is going to be a little close, these parking spaces and the pedestrian linkage that they want to bring in that runs right in here, and with traffic turning in. And one of the things that the applicant wants to do is to have an arrangement with the shopping center across the street where the Mellow Mushroom is, and those things for overflow parking. So there was some concern that, when people were walking there to the parking spaces, that there could be a conflict between cars turning in and out, and where this sidewalk area is going to extend in there, and there could be people taking that sidewalk and then stepping out into the parking area to further access up into the parking lot, and cars turning in and out. So we did want to mention that. Don't know if there's any way to address that or sort of redesign that pedestrian connection in there. I know the grade sort of drops off, and it would be nice to have a tie into the greenway there, but the way you're grading in there could be an issue.
With the
Can
way
you
the
tell us one more time who you are?
I'm sorry, Grant Berry with Site Incorporated, 10215 Technology Drive. The with the way the grade is through there between it and the greenway, the only way really to move that in any way would be to eliminate a handful of spaces in order to pull that connection further away from Grigsby Chapel. At this point in time, it is 50 feet. Over 50 feet from the travel lanes of Grigsby Chapel, so any cars turning in, by the time you get to 50 feet, they're straightened out and should be able to, you're out of the turning movement, and therefore they would be able to have decent visibility looking straight up that road before you got to where people could get onto the sidewalk as it stands now. But if we need to, eliminate another space or two to try to pull that another 15 feet away or so, that could be done. But
Anybody on the planning commission have a thought on that? I always like to be on the safe side when it comes to people and walking and sidewalks and trails.
I agree.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm the same person who spoke last. Robert Hill, 11504 Mountain View Road, Farragut, Tennessee, USA. I walk that greenway almost every day, and I've looked at the drawings this afternoon and with our planner there, Bart, and that the movement proposed for that greenway, I think, is inconsequential. It appears to me that it won't be a problem at all to walk it if it's moved. My only request is that when you move it, get Mark Shipley out there and let it and don't cut any trees to move it. Just let it jiggle around the trees and be where it is. Now, he's located a lot of walking trails like that, but I don't see any, as a walker on the trail, I don't see any problem at all with moving the trail as they've got it shown on the drawing.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I think we were supposed to maybe see a color and materials board, number 14.
Okay. Do I have a question or comment?
Oh, good.
Let's go ahead. I'm going to erase that.
Didn't break something. Who's Robert?
Can you tell
Sorry,
us who
I've
you
never
are,
been
please,
to a
and give us
town
an
meeting
address?
before.
Give us a name and address.
Kelly McCarty, and I live at 480 Chapel Grove Lane. My objection is to the additional parking that we were talking about a minute ago, to accommodate spaces for the Mellow Mushroom employees that are actually across the street. I don't see the need to have extra spaces there and have them crossing the street. If they need extra parking, if you ever drive by that parking lot for that office that's already built, there's always empty spaces, if not an empty lot. So why they're not parking there already is a question I have. And I would not like to see extra spaces be added in that aren't required for the additional office building requirements.
Okay.
Bart, is it overparked now?
It is an overparked condition.
By how much?
I don't have the number right in front of me. I know we calculated that at one point, and they did have to go in and do some redesign work to add in some additional islands, and also they're going to have to do some pervious paving in those areas. So that that was something we brought up. There is more parking there than needs be.
I don't see any need right there.
I rarely ever see that parking lot presently full.
They're adding 88 more spaces.
Yeah.
And based on the size of the additional building back there,
It's way overparked.
Yeah, they do have potential plans to, at some point in the future, they may want to add a third building, so that may be generating some of the additional parking. And I know the applicant is can maybe speak to the reason for the extra parking. It was something we flagged during the staff developer meeting, and told them that if they were going to be in an overpark condition, that they did then have to satisfy the ordinance and add additional landscape islands and pervious parking spaces. And so they've gone back and done that to some extent. One of our comments is the way they went about doing the pervious won't satisfy the ordinance, and they'll have to convert some full spaces to that. But that's a adjustment they can make in the plan.
I will say this about whether they're parked at the number they need to be. This is an office here. The thought is that people that work over there will be parking after hours anyway, so there's going to be available parking there whether you have more parking or not. So the access to it would still be there whether we require them to just stick with their regular parking spaces. Regular required number of parking spaces. I'm not entirely sure why they're adding more. It may be, and I don't know if you add in that extra office building, would it be still overparked? I don't
know. I've not done that, and actually, whether or not I don't know if they could put any more parking. They might want to add a little more. And again, the site designer's here, and they can address those issues, better than I can.
Yeah.
In terms of what their thinking is.
Did the applicant, why don't you guys, can you address while you're adding? Because that would help.
give us your name and address, please.
Barry Bird Architecture, 5421 Fountain Road in Knoxville. The applicant, Sam Issue, who is sitting here, he's here to address you also if you have any questions, owns the shopping center across the street. The shopping center across the street has a number of restaurants in it, and it tends to fill up at night. Sam wanted to do this development. This parcel was available, and there's been quite a bit of interest in this parcel, so we felt like it could be a nice development to group the buildings. Our intent on the buildings was to, we were the architect on the shopping center across the street. We were also the architect on this development, so we're trying to blend everything together. In fact, I think Mark told me to bring a sample board, which we'll leave with you. We're using the same brick, the same materials, the same architecture. The building in the back will appear to be 2 stories, kind of like the shopping center across the street, but will only be 1 story. And we think with the new development, it's going to generate some more activity. Some of the tenants in that existing building are beginning to switch out. And so we think that parking lot will start to fill up also. So the fact that it's not full at the moment doesn't mean there's some empty space in that building right now. So as tenants change, and we believe that it will stay medical in nature, all the interest has been medical. Sometimes medical can fill up depending on the type of practice that goes in there. So you need an adequate number of parking spaces. That original building is land leased to Lilybridge, which was hired by St. Mary's to run all their outbuilding facilities when it was St. Mary's. Now it's Tenova.
That's actually incorrect.
Okay.
So.
Wait a minute, we need you to come to them.
Okay.
And you need to tell us who you are and give us an address.
We're going to do tag team, I think, don't we?
Probably. So my name's Amanda Gray. I'm with Lilybridge Healthcare Services, which owns LHT Knoxville Properties, which is the owner of the ground lease for that building. So we actually bought those assets from St. Mary's back around 1998. So we don't manage them for them, we actually own it.
I think, I guess the point being that we think as time goes on, there may be some additional development. There may be need for some parking, overflow parking from across the street. And since this owner also owns that, it seemed like a convenient option to make it less congested, to spread that parking out, if you will. And if it becomes a problem, he might ask some of the employees to park across the street. If I were driving through there and I saw a full parking lot, I might park across the street and walk across myself. That option would be available. We met with the neighborhood a few weeks ago. I don't remember how long ago, but we met with the neighborhood behind. We wanted to show them what we were doing and listen to their comments. One of their big concerns was right now it's very densely wooded between our development and the existing development. But in the winter, most of those trees are deciduous. So they ask if we could plant some evergreens. So we've instructed the landscape architect to change the plans, which she did. And now we have some hollies, some white pines, a number of other trees in there. I walked the trail the other day, and you can't even tell that there are condos behind on the other side of the creek. It's so dense right now. None of our tree clearing goes anywhere near that buffer. And in fact, we have a plan that shows you how many trees are not being touched in this development. We basically, if you envision this development with a clump of trees, we set our building right in the middle, so the buffers all remained around the trees. So we have addressed what we felt like were some of the neighbors' concerns, because there is parking in there that might shine some headlights toward their residents. It is for scale purpose, from the edge of the parking to our property line is about 150 to 180 feet, depending on where you measure.
Are you talking about Chapel Grove?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And then the Chapel Grove, they're the most impacted residents. So that's who we met with. And then I'm sure they're somewhere around 50 feet or so on the other side of the line. I don't know. We don't have their site plan, so we don't know where those condos begin. So we think that we have a buffer of about 200 feet or so between us and the neighbors, which we're maintaining. We're not cutting anything in that lower area. I think I went left and right and all around. I apologize. That's the way I talk.
So Bart. Sure. Do we have any provisions or whatever when there's shared parking like this? I know we talked about shared parking recently.
Well, we do have provisions for shared parking in the ordinance. In this case, I think we were approaching it from the standpoint of that, that there were already easements and for access and shared parking and traffic circulation in place. Our comment number 2 is we just want those clarified to make sure that, that's all going to work together properly. And I think they've had their attorneys look at that.
I don't understand. It seems to me that you would only consider shared parking if there was under parking, not over parking.
Well, they seem to have put those easements in place
There's
when they
underparked on the
when
other
they
side.
when they did the land lease. So
Across the street where
Yeah.
the Mellow Mushroom is?
Yeah.
That's underparked.
Yeah. Well,
No, it meets the ordinance, but
it seems underparked with all the restaurants. It's,
Well, and at night, yeah,
Yeah.
it's crowded.
Yeah.
There's
It's
no
busy.
question.
it met the ordinance, and then a few years ago, we redesigned the parking lot. We added about 29 spaces, and it's still full. So it's overparked now, and it's still full.
problem to have.
Any other questions or comments? Okay.
I think we still had residents that wanted to.
From a business perspective, that's good.
I thought about what was said about the sharing parking spaces. We've not, in this town, we've not been favorably disposed to share parking spaces. But there is a simple solution to this if the owners, whoever they are, would agree to it. And that is that the town it used the park and ride lot for some amount of time when the bus ran out there and stopped there. That lot has about 30 parking spaces in it. It's used by six people who go to Jazzercise at the back. It's used by 3 or 4 commuters who, I think, share a carpool out of there. But if the Mellow Mushroom wanted safe parking space for their customers to get from their parking place to the Mellow Mushroom, then I would think that they would be favorably disposed to trying to lease some parking spaces in that park and ride lot and use that, because you don't have to cross any streets to get there. You got a sidewalk to walk on. It's like 300 feet, and it's well lighted and easy to access the Mellow Mushroom there. And it's not used now as a park and ride lot. And it's not clear to me that the city the town owns it. But on the other hand, I don't know who owns it. But the town did put in 2 bike holders, bike filing cabinets, I say they are. And they're still there, I think. When we were enthusiastic about ride sharing and park and ride, which I'm still enthusiastic about. But I'd say that's an alternative for the Mellow Mushroom to look at in preference to having their customers walk across the street. Regarding what Sam plans to build there, as I understand it, it's an office building, doctor's office building, and there would be very little traffic in there at night. So the neighbors over there in Chapel Point, even in the wintertime, they wouldn't see much in the way of light, except for the lights in the parking lot for that new development Sam proposes. And I've still got some comments to make about that when you get around to that. And this time I'll try to sit down where there's a chair.
I'm H.G. McCarty. I live on Chapel Grove Lane, 480 Chapel Grove Lane. A couple of things. You're talking about overparking and underparking and those sort of things. But really, aren't you talking about one development and one proposal, and somebody's asking you to approve additional parking places for that one development and that one proposal? I don't know that there's anything in there that starts talking about melon mushroom. So I don't know why we're talking about melon mushroom. You have a proposal for one development, and you have parking regulations for that one development. And it doesn't matter if they're going to build another building. You don't have a proposal for that building. You have a proposal for one building and the appropriate parking for that. Now, you've been asked to approve more parking. Well, okay, sometimes that's a good idea. The additional parking that's being added is being added up at the northwest corner, which is as far as you can physically get from this building, which is the only thing we're talking about here. Now, when people whip in there and park, their lights are going in my house. That's why I'm here. So the overparking that you've been asked to approve is affecting someone, and more than me. Those additional numbers of parking spaces up there, I don't see are really truly required for this proposal. There's parking. And if somebody wants to go in there at night, there's still parking. It's not getting any worse at night. Now they're talking about, well, maybe we could have different clients in this other building over here, which isn't part of the proposal. But now we're talking about maybe they could have more parking over there. They could need more parking. Maybe, maybe not. But that's not in the proposal. So now you also want to add additional lighting in what is the additional parking, which is as far away from the building as you can possibly get. I guess what I'm saying is, are we focused here on what it is we're talking about? Maybe it's because it's my ox being gored here, but it doesn't seem like it to me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
The two issues he mentioned, one, the lighting, we are 0-foot candles at our property line, so there's no light spillage over on the adjacent property. I believe, my understanding, we are allowed to overpark. We're not asking for permission we are, because Farragut has guidelines on what is required if you do overpark. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, and our comment was really regarding the pedestrian connection up there, just to make sure that there wasn't going to be a conflict, knowing, that there was some interest in allowing, some overflow parking on the property that's, I guess, owned by the same property owner on the other side of Grigsby Chapel Road. I mean, they are in an overpark condition, but they have met all the requirements, or they're willing to meet all the requirements with some minor adjustments to their site plan, to satisfy the ordinance for that overpark condition. So,
But we have nothing before us asking that we allow shared parking for the benefit of the Mellow Mushroom, do we?
no, I mean,
Okay, so that's not on the table. What's on the
Yeah.
table is whether we permit the overparking at the proposed building site, right?
And whether you want to see it pull back a little bit because of that pedestrian connection,
Right.
and maybe a spot or two less
Okay.
to get a little bit more distance between Grigsby Chapel
I
Road
just
and
wanted to clarify
and that.
what I understood was on the table versus what the gentleman thought
Yeah.
was on the table. Okay.
I'm still not sure what's on the table.
Certainly not shared parking for the benefit of Mellow Mushroom.
It is overparking.
Yes, overparking on this site, on this proposed plan that is before us. Pardon?
So what end? Why are we doing it? Why are
Well, we
Haven't done anything yet.
we haven't yet.
We're hearing.
Based on our parking is based on the size of the building.
Yeah, yeah.
So based on the size of the building, what,
They have more parking than what would be required under the ordinance. And, they're choosing to do that, and there is a disincentive in your regulations when someone does choose to do that. They have to add additional landscaping, they have to do pervious paving. It's not prohibited by the ordinance, there's just a disincentive in there to try to encourage people not to. But, they can create an overpark situation.
But we don't have to approve it.
I'm not sure on what basis, you wouldn't if they're meeting the ordinance. Now, if you're concerned about, the distance there, that we brought up in terms of, the 40 or 50 foot between Grigsby Chapel and a potential there for pedestrian connectivity, you could, ask them to eliminate a couple of those parking spaces there at the extreme north, to alleviate that.
How many spaces are overparked? Is it overparked by? What's the excess? How many spaces?
I don't have that right in front of me, to be honest with you. It's the engineer or the site designer might, but
It is, there are 53 spaces required, there are 88 shown, so it's overparked by 35.
for the whole thing here?
Not
For both
It's
buildings?
over what's being
Not for
requested.
For this,
We're not looking at
for
that.
this
For this
particular,
building
the
and-
lease lot that the new building is on.
Okay,
So it's
for this area.
So it's 60% overparked.
Because this is
That
its
looks
own
like 80,
building.
that doesn't look like 80 spaces.
And so, but what we're considering is just for this one building. We're not talking about that front building and all the parking in that front building. We're just
Correct.
talking about the back new building and the parking that's going to be new because of that.
Correct.
And
That's
We can't hear you. You need to
35
come-
divided by 55, I don't have my calculator. It's roughly, I do got a calculator.
35 extra spaces.
60% seems like overkill to me when we have a lot of maybes on the table. It may be this, it may be that, we might need it in the future. When you're talking about taking down, an area that doesn't need to be paved over, in the interest of having 60% more parking spaces that we don't even know that we need, I would urge the committee to not approve that just because it may meet the regulations. Doesn't mean, as the commissioner said, that you need to approve that,
Their meeting.
and I would urge you not to.
I don't know that we have the
Farragut
ability.
Green.
I don't know that we have the ability to tell them they can't do that. Our regulations specifically tell them they can.
If
We
they
just-
mitigate, if they mitigate it.
If they mitigate it. We give them that permission in the regulations. We just tell them to, I mean, I think we could probably at least pull out those 3 spots right at the front for safety issues. I would feel comfortable saying public
Pull out
safety.
all of it, right?
Would you, how much would you pull out?
Looks like about 15, those first,
Well, that's,
those top northernmost spaces.
They
I don't know.
concern me because of cars pulling in and
And you've got,
cars pulling out. You're creating quite a,
And it's not only the crosswalk there for Grigsby Chapel, it's also the entrance and exit for the Greenway.
I don't think you have enough to take that many.
and I think I can't quite make out the scale on the picture there, but I think it's a 40 scale as opposed to a 20 scale map. So, or either 40 or 50. So it's, there's a little more distance. The distance between the road and that first parking spot is 40 to 50 feet.
It's
You know,
about
that-
50 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is something we checked. So it's not as close as it appears if you're used to looking at a 20 scale site plan, but it's maybe 2 car lengths.
But we're
there.
not talking about parking for the original building anyway, are we?
No, this is
only-
purely
only
for this
parking we're
addition
talking about is
and the
the
additional
parking in the
parking they're
back.
putting in. Yeah.
Around this new building.
Right, so I think that's part of the discussion, is that why is that parking so far away from the new building?
Are you talking that backs up to the parking that is backing up to the Greenway area there?
I
talking about
suppose,
this up here,
Well,
being that far away from the building.
well, that goes
It's pretty
with the-
far away from the new building to be,
So all of this
part
is
of that.
new?
All of this.
All of that's new.
but this lot is completely
Cl-
separate.
Separate.
It's separate, it's a land lease, they're not
Yeah.
accessing this.
Okay,
This, whatever we're talking about is right here.
right.
And what'll get used for this building's right in here.
And then that also creates different areas for light pollution as well. If you're adding that additional parking for that new building in a different spot there, I think that changes the dynamics of the light pollution as well. There was some discussion at the neighborhood meeting that he had referenced a little while ago about putting up a fence, and no one has mentioned that here today. I wonder if anyone has any more information about that?
After the meeting, I did talk to Mark Shipley, and he was against us putting a fence right on the edge of the parking spaces. So we asked him if it would be acceptable for us to put some additional planting there, like a hedge or something like that, and he said yes. So we have done that.
Would that be behind the parking places?
Yes.
Or on the other side of the Greenway?
No,
It would be, what was requested was, at the parking spaces, the grade tends to fall off. So it was requested right at the end of the parking spaces. But Mark requested, said the town would not support that.
And as a representative for the building that is existing, I will say that we do have parking along that front that gets very congested during high peak times for when the doctors are seeing patients. So you're not going to see it in the evenings, but you will see it during those peak times. I will also say that many of our employees use that Greenway Trail. And so they will walk through that path. And so it's mostly going to be our employees as well. I believe we have easements there for our access as well, for our people to park there. So as the owner of the older building, we are in favor of that additional parking.
And I just have one last comment about the plantings. It was also discussed that maybe a 5 to 6 foot
Wine, water.
Tree would be, a couple of trees would be placed there. I'm 5'10", and so a 6-foot
hard to
tree
Chinese.
is not really going to have much
No,
of
it's,
an
I
impact,
think
I don't think, on either noise or
Left in
light.
the hand to walk across
It
the
would
tree.
take years for those types of trees to get high enough to actually prevent any of that from coming through our neighborhood and impacting us in a pretty big way.
What are the lighting requirements over there because it backs up to residential?
Well, there'll be zero at the property line on the west side there.
Okay.
In terms of the, site lighting,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any more questions or comments?
And their landscaping plan is on the agenda for the Visual Resources Review Board this
Okay.
coming Tuesday.
So her concern is from car lights?
The
lighting.
the parking lot lights, I think.
I understood.
And the
Car light, I
and the
Uh,
car lights.
Him to say that there would be no,
I think they were concerned about car lights, particularly in the winter when the
Trees.
trees were down. That's why we voluntarily added the evergreens, and then we put the hedge in. So we're trying to do everything that we can. We have turned in photometrics, and we do have zero at the property line, which is probably 50 feet away from the back of the condos also.
so will car lights reach Chapel Grove?
What if you have
Car lights will,
every,
With,
with
there may-
no additional
There's
landscape.
always a possibility, but that can happen in any parking lot, as a car moves through a parking lot. Even if there aren't spaces there, as a car moves through, the headlights go different directions.
So any other questions or comments?
I guess we have number 14.
That's the issue.
Is the applicant going to talk about the building he's building? Is that, are you planning to do more of that?
Yes, and we want to see your,
Material and color board.
Do you have the color rendering, that color elevations you can bring up?
I don't think
I
that
think
got
it's the
put in the
last
pack.
sheet in that packet. No, you don't.
Have it on the
Okay.
PowerPoint.
building?
Is it any of your packets?
not a color.
Okay.
Or
The building?
I have no elevation of the building.
Yeah, I don't know if Mark had that when he put the packet together, so.
Did you have your board? that
Yes,
would-
ma'am. These are the same materials that are on the Bell Mushroom Building, the shopping center, the Walgreens, and the St. Mary's. We did all three of those, and then we picked the same materials and the same style of architecture, so they'll all blend together. Do I leave this with you?
Bart,
Did we
what-
receive an elevation? Do we have an elevation?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so. I just don't have it here.
right here.
I'm thinking about it. No, an elevation, a look of the building.
Oh, no.
And you keep these?
No, you just show them.
Just show 'em, okay.
You wanna-
If you want to leave it and then come back and get it, if I'll let Mark take a look at it as well, but.
Yeah.
And does this meet our,
Architectural.
architectural design standards?
There wasn't any comment on that in our comment packet. That,
What it looks like.
Yeah, the comments we got were positive from our meeting, from the staff.
yeah, if
That's
it,
comfortable with it.
yeah, if it had been an issue, it would have been in the comments and recommendations that came out.
Okay.
But as far as it being, the percentages of masonry and all like that, it's, okay.
Building comments.
Here, we just didn't get 'em.
Ma'am? I wanted to talk about the building layout. I looked this afternoon at Bart's package that had the drawings in it, and I apologize for missing the site development meeting. I would have known this then. I talked to Sam this afternoon, Mr. Mishu, he's back there. We've known each other for a long time. So he would know what I'm going to say in advance of my saying it. But I would like to see on that site, the building that's first going to be built is approximately a 12,000 square foot single-story building, and it's off at the back of the site. A second building will be built, which is about 20,000 square feet, which is on the northeast corner of the site. And my request to Sam and my request to you all is to reconsider that site plan and move the first building as close to the front street line as you can, and not build it way back. And
Front street meaning Grigsby Chapel?
South Campbell Station
Yes,
Road.
Campbell Station.
And I would really like to see, in the second building, I'd really like to see the first building built so that you could add a second floor to it and make an addition, just make that a single business office building instead of two on the site. And that has some engineering advantages to it. One is it's conservation of space. It allows you a centralized avenue for putting the services in. It's easier to maintain a single building than it is two buildings, and it doesn't take as much land. And that cures several problems. The one I'm most interested in curing is not cutting any trees, or very few trees, that are on the west side of that property down next to the walking trail. There's a 30-inch oak tree in there that's probably twice as old as I am, which makes it 180 years old. And I wouldn't want to see that cut. Some of those trees will never grow to their full height in your lifetime, certainly not in mine. I would really like to see Sam consider the proposition I made to him, and I did not ask for his approval at the time. I just wanted him to know what it was. But if I were sitting in your chair, as I used to sit, I would have done the same thing. And I would have done it much earlier had I been at the site development meeting. And I would like to have done it before he put any pencil on paper at all. So that's my comment on it.
No, you didn't ask. Did he volunteer any comment to your suggestion?
I didn't ask on purpose.
I understand that you didn't ask.
You
Did
don't
he
wanna- don't wanna
volunteer
ask a question
any
that you
comment?
don't know the answer to.
I think we're about to get that.
She's going to have a comment.
My name is Sam Mishu, and I live on 484 Chapel Grove Lane. And Bob came to see me a few hours, 2 hours before the meeting, and he suggested that I change everything. And building is designed. My experience, one-story building does. I feel much better about leasing it than 2 stories. If this leases well, then we will move to another building by Campbell Station. But banking today and all this stuff we have, they want you to have it pre-leased like 60% before they lend you the money. And 2 stories going to be impossible to, especially for medical buildings and all that. Well, that's what we're thinking to do. So I'm asking to keep that design. It's already been done, and I will listen to Bob next time when he comes see me. Hopefully a month before it's submitted.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
ask just really quick, Bart? So 50 feet are you comfortable with that for safety issues that you think those parking spots, there's enough room
I mean,
for people backing out to see people coming in and?
it was questioned at the staff level. I mean, it meets the minimum, in the ordinance. We were thinking it'd be nice if it was a little longer in there than what it is, but
I talked
if
to
it's
Sam, we'd be willing to give up another 4 spaces, that next group of spaces up there for extra safety, if that's okay.
so that'd be
That's 3 spaces? Looks like 3 spaces?
yeah, 3 spaces and a landscape island.
3
but-
plus 4, right?
3, yes. That next group, that first
Yeah.
group.
We're talking about these 7.
Be doing away with the island there as well?
That sounds like it's just
it-
getting rid of
Or
He
would
said
that,
4. I thought
that
that's
would
what he was.
actually be a nice addition there to,
this thing.
Actually, what we would ask them to do is just extend the grass area down to the new the new beginning of the parking spaces and extend that sidewalk down, just, to, have the pedestrians removed from the traffic circulation for that extra, what's it going to be, another 27 feet and 3
Let's be
spaces,
clear on
3
what
times
Yeah,
9.
let's get clarity. Can you go back to the one that has the parking so you can show us which spots we think are being taken out so that we understand what's.
Because when he said 4, I'm thinking it's 4 plus
There's
3.
3, yes.
Because the first 3 and then there's 4.
It was 3. Most of the groupings had 4
Here we
spaces,
go.
and at that last one, it only shook out to have
So it's just
3
the
in it,
first
but
3.
It's those 3, but then, so what,
Plus the island.
plus the island, so basically that
That's-
whole area would become green
It's
space
basically
instead of
those
just the
spaces, and
island.
then they would
Yeah.
just extend for some reason, this thing has got a lag in it, would extend down to about there, the pedestrian facility.
Okay.
The sidewalk connection would end up being where that island is now.
Okay.
Well, I think that's much safer for
Everybody.
people at night, too, walking through, coming across from the other shopping center. Traffic through Grigsby Chapel is very heavy, and it gives more space for the people to make a quick dash over through there. That's one of the things that bothers me is the people crossing Grigsby Chapel, but
We've passed, in our first budget, we put in a CIP amendment to include a pedestrian-activated crosswalk, signalized crosswalk, so that people can get across there safely.
okay, yeah.
Do we need to add the verbiage for 19, or do you want us to have that on record?
Yeah,
I wrote out what 19 should be.
yeah, that would be fine.
With the Grigsby Chapel Greenway being relocated, an associated easement will require replatting, and the replat will need to include additional right-of-way dedication along a section of Grigsby Chapel Road. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's fine.
I should be able to read my own handwriting, and I don't, so. That would be 19, subject to 19. Did you guys hear that, and you're okay with that? Okay.
And then they'll be eliminating those 3 spots as
And
part of it,
eliminating-
as part of addressing item 2.
And, okay, item 2, let me go back to item 2.
Oh, wait a minute. No, that's the wrong, it was, item 11 is the one that it deals with the pedestrian conflict at the ingress and egress point.
So what do you want, and the removal, do you want to take that out and say, instead of that, say removal of the first 3 spaces?
That'd be fine.
Then removal of the northernmost 3 spaces, is that correct? Is that clear enough for you?
and extending the sidewalk.
And extending sidewalk. So you guys are clear with that one? You- Okay.
And all the other subject twos, or there?
Number 6, where it speaks to grading extending beyond the area needed for this project. I believe he was referring to the area where if you go to the grading plan, we are grading an area just to the east of the building and beyond where the proposed parking is in this phase. And that area that we're grading is simply because the area to the west of the building that is all in fill, the area to the east of the building is the higher ground that we're going to need to cut that area in order to generate some of the material to place the fill on the west side of the building, and that's why we're showing grading in that area.
Is that something that we,
We were just hoping that that could be pulled back as much as possible. There are a couple of additional trees that'll be lost. I mean, they're offsetting them, but
There's one, we're looking at it. There's one larger one that we can definitely move the line to grade around and save that one. There's one smaller one that's definitely right in the middle of it that we wouldn't be able to. But in general, that's really the only place on site to get material.
we were just trying to limit disturbance as much as possible. But
The smaller ones were 12 inches or less. The one larger one was around 30 inches, and that one we can save.
okay. I think that's fair. So do we need to amend that note in there? Let's see, or is that just a suggestion?
I think it's looks sufficient to me. It says should be limited, and he's explained that he. Why?
So we have, by doing that, does that fulfill that requirement to you all? That by saving that 30, by backing off from that, he's fulfilling that requirement?
Well, to me, it's part of the, they have to meet that requirement, and staff will review that,
Okay.
to me.
I think it's the definition of what portion of the grading is needed for this project, and
Right.
in my opinion, that grading is needed in order to get the
Yeah.
soil material
Yeah.
for the fill elsewhere.
But
Are you satisfied, Bart?
yeah, we'll note that the planning commission is okay with most of that grading. With the understanding they're going to attempt to pull it back to save the one large tree.
Okay, I guess with that, I'm going to,
Are you good with all the rest of the subject twos? Yes. Okay.
okay, where am I? I'm going to move to approve the site plan for Grigsby Chapel offices, subject to 1 through 19. Do I need to, I've already said the amendments to them, so I don't need to put that in my motion, do I?
Yes.
With the amended number, oh, well, this is what I'm looking at. Amended numbers 11 and the addition of 19. Is that sufficient?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got the notes on it.
Okay.
second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Thank you. Item number 11, discussion and public hearing on a request for the approval of the site plan for Phase 2 of Little Turkey Creek Commons Retail Shop, 12,500 through 12,584 Kingston Pike, 11.84 acres, Zone C-1, and FPD Robert Sagan applicant.
It's 10 to 10. They may have to change the tape at 10.
Oh, that's right. So, want to go ahead and do that now before we start on the last one?
Yeah, let's take a break.
Check real quick and.
Okay.
are you? Oh, wow. I bet you will.
You want some fries?
Thank you. Cold fries.
Yeah, okay.
I think there's a knife in there.
I'll just start it down fast.
Another consideration, which is on the second board, is a masonry brick, which is a complement to the brick in terms of its height. It's a little wider. It's 16-inch wide, but we feel would complement the stone, the oversized stone on the existing building more appropriately than standard 4x8 brick.
I don't know what you mean by that. Do you have something to show us? Or?
Why don't I bring the board to show you? I don't have a physical sample, but if you don't mind, I'll come up and bring that. So this is it is a through-wall stone that is a concrete material that's poured similar to concrete masonry units, but it's designed in both color tones, and material finish to appear as brick, but it's also a structural component and can be used as part of the structure as well. I believe there are some buildings in the area that have those, although I couldn't give you a good example of that.
I'm not sure. Do you have any experience with this?
It's essentially a concrete unit similar to CMU, not that sort of gray or cut stone. They are manufactured to the size of brick.
Yes, it's not a face
longer,
yet.
but it's not
Okay.
an actual
Solid.
clay material.
And does it have
It's
to
a
be?
concrete
Does it have to
composite
be
material.
laid like brick?
Yes, it would be. It would be laid like brick with grout joints and everything the same.
What was the reason you couldn't comply with the request to bring the materials and color board?
Oh, I apologize. We understood to bring a color board, and I was noted today that we should have actual materials, so we did not bring those, but we can obviously bring those at a follow-up meeting.
You would want a variance from the 75% masonry. How much variance?
It could be, what we're showing on this model here, and if you want, I'll bring this up just so that you can see this closer. This option here shows the EFIS stopping, and we would have brick all the way up, 75% compliance, potentially color the brick to play with the EFIS. This option, we have the parapets around the side and brick below.
That's what the
This is
side
about-
of the existing
this is-
building looks like.
That's correct. This option is shown here at 53% masonry, although we could play within the size of the parapet potentially, but roughly we're at 55% versus the 75.
And what's the percentage on the current building?
0.
Yeah, this
It is
current
zero.
building doesn't
That was
have any
because
brick
that was
on it.
because that building was built, before architectural design standards. This being a new building, our architectural design standards apply to it.
I understand.
I'll say this, and I know because I'm impacted, I'll be looking at this all the time. I have a few things. I have struggled with our architectural design standards, mostly because I'm not an architect. So I struggle with what we were trying to accomplish with it, and I think really we wanted to make sure we were getting classic construction, timeless, something that wasn't going to age itself. But I'm looking at the back of this building, which won't be visible to anyone, and we're making them brick it. The whole back of this building is bricked, and it serves no purpose because it's just going to be employees and the gentlemen that come and empty the garbage and the air conditioning units. And it's a pretty back of your building, but then you're adding to the cost of the building, which adds to the rent of the building.
Well,
And that frustrates me. So I have a hard time with that.
I'm not sure that's true if they're using this structural thing here. It's probably cheaper that way.
Okay, and I agree, and I could give that. I don't know if that does. Does that add to the cost of it? Could it have been done?
The masonry brick would be more cost-effective than the full-size brick.
Okay.
Well, my thing with brick is the structure of the building and how long it's going to last and how long it's going to look good.
Yeah.
And you can't pick and choose what area of the building you do that to. It will be there 75 years from now in a better shape than what,
It would be if you used I understand that.
that's my whole, not my whole point with brick, but a large part of it.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's a fair enough point, if you're looking at it from a structural point of view. I will also say, because that initial building was built before we had guidelines, we have to make a decision, do we want these buildings to look like sisters or like cousins? Because you back away from, this is the sides of the buildings have this look all the way around them. And do you want that consistency? Because you're not going to be meeting it with the original buildings have what is a stone look. It's a nice looking look, but it's not considered masonry. So they're going to brick this building, which is fine. You're going to have something, like I said, looks like sisters, not identical.
Well, and the school is there that's bricked.
Yeah. But that's a totally different look.
It is,
Yeah.
but still, it's.
But I'm talking about, do we want to pool around their second idea where you're pulling, because that is what the sides of our current buildings look like, is what they're showing on the right side. But it gets
With
away
lesser
from.
masonry.
Is that painted, that brick is painted on this? It's still brick, or?
It's still brick. They
But you
have a
painted it
pigment,
to-
yes.
To make look like the other building.
That's correct.
Well, you're not gonna even see these sides right here or here. The only thing that's gonna be.
Would you point out to me
Well, this
on
one
the
you
front
won't
of the
see.
buildings, what each, it looks like you said there's ephes somewhere.
No, when
That's
you're
right.
in there, when
It's,
you're walking around, you'll
Ephes
see
is
it.
just at this upper portion here, the decorative parapet above. Everything below this line is masonry, is brick.
So it looks like it's only about 50% masonry.
On this option here, where we have actually taken this parapet around the sides, because we're looking at all four sides for that calculation, it is about 55%. In order to get to the 75%, we would not be able to take that parapet around the side, which would be
Side by side.
more comparable to the existing building on the site that does have that parapet.
Well, my main concern is the fact that this is a new building, and we have architectural standards.
Thank you.
And I hate to compromise our architectural standards at this point. What we've done so far have been additions to buildings that we have backed off a little bit. It's additions, but not a brand-new building.
But it's a brand-new building and an existing subdivision. And it is going to look different than the existing building. And you may not notice that from the street, but you will notice it as a pedestrian in there, and it will not look cohesive. And there is something to be said for that compromise can be made there. Where else are we going to see that exception having to be made in the town?
Well, we made a
Potentially-
similar exception, did we not, to the Campbell Station property there where the building was just torn down, near Cracker Barrel? We made some concessions there because, actually, that building was torn down and we're putting a new one there. And we backed off of making that building comply with today's standards. Because that existing building behind it.
I think the building complies, but the parking lot does not.
Yeah, the parking lot does
The
not.
parking lot and the sidewalk.
Yeah, the architectural standards on the new building are compliant.
Yeah.
It's just, really the nonconformity on that site was the existing parking and retaining walls and all of that. So the building they put back in meets the standards.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Repeat that, the building they.
The building up at Station West, the new building that's being built there will be compliant with the architectural standards as they're written today.
Yeah, and when
You
you
know.
tear down the second one, it will come back as a new building that
Yeah.
will meet that.
But we
The last sentence under the, no, two last sentences. The middle building that is proposed is oriented in a different direction from the existing building. This, along with landscaping, will be added around the new building, could help lessen incompatibility.
Yeah, I think Mark's thought on that is if you look at this site, the buildings aren't just in a straight line along Kingston Pike. The fact that they zigzag a little bit, means that you're looking at a portion of the side of the building and a portion of the front of the building. So that modifies the look a little bit from the street and on what you're going to be seeing.
Well, it does give some separateness, a separateness look to it, if you will, implying that they don't have to look so much like sisters. Cousins might be close enough.
I guess I disagree, but then maybe that's where my financial interest comes in. I'm there every day. And I think we're making a mistake here, but I think I might have to recuse myself from this vote.
I think the thing that, if we make this concession here, there's going to be other concessions that are going to be requested.
Let's talk that through. Where do we see that happening? West End is looking, it may be looking to build a building, but those will be, where do we see this exception where we might have to apply it again?
Well,
I don't know that we can do it off the spur of the moment.
Yeah.
Okay, but then once you go down that road,
Yeah.
over time, we haven't had very many instances where we have been precedent oriented, but there have been some very important ones that we have done. It goes back to even when people would do things and then come and ask for forgiveness afterwards, and things of that nature. I just worry about setting precedents where I'm not clairvoyant enough to know when it's going to come up, but I know it will come up.
Well,
I mean,
we've already backed off.
Over time, it's
I'm always-
the lesson to me is that when these things do come up, I can't sit here and think over and answer a question in 2 minutes.
I understand.
Okay, but it will come up.
You open Pandora's box.
We've
when
already
we do
backed
that.
off the brick requirement for the apartments across the, which ones on Campbell Station Road?
Overlook.
Overlook.
Yeah, that was sort of before, my
The
time.
standards.
I don't have that sort of historical
But we did
perspective on
back
some of
off
these
of
projects.
that requirement to about 63 or 65%.
But not on the front ones on Camel Station,
Yeah.
I didn't think. I thought it was the back ones that you didn't see from Camel Station.
I think it was, the one we saw from Campbell Station was the,
Clubhouse, and we did.
The
stay with-
clubhouse.
We did stay with that.
And also, wasn't the timing had to do with that too, of, we had started,
That process before the architect was done.
right. The process with those apartments had started before the architectural
they
standards.
had not
had been-
approved anything. They had not gotten approval
I think
on.
I think on that one, it was started before you bumped it from, what was it, 60 to 75.
Yeah.
And I think that was the issue.
Yeah.
I came in at the tail end of that, but I think that's what the issue was.
Right.
But I have found that if you give exceptions one place, somebody's going to come to you for exceptions other places.
I understand, but if those exceptions are because we're trying to maintain the integrity of the design of that, that development, isn't that the time to think about giving those exceptions?
Yeah, it's pretty tough to have a hard standard where you're redeveloping against,
This isn't redevelopment.
Well, you're,
It's a separate building.
It is.
And the way it's facing and everything else, it's gonna, I disagree with it. It's gonna look that much different to everybody that's going by that. It's already gonna, quite frankly, I'm more worried about the fact that we ever let just these shotgun type, business lots versus, the architectural variation in the front facade like we did with the new optical.
Yeah.
building. We spent a lot of time with what was going to make that different, okay? And this is just flat front and shotgun.
Yeah, but we allowed that, so are we going to,
That was 2005.
Well,
This is-
and
so you have
This
an
is-
integrity of whatever
This
you've
is
got
13
going on.
years later.
Yep, and,
With the
but,
design standard.
but we still have an integrity of the property that we're corrupting, and I'm not sure that we're winning.
Disagree that we're corrupting it.
We're winning something in there,
I
so.
think we're making each of the buildings distinctive.
And I think with that different color with the CMU, I think it adds, strength, structural
Did you-
integrity plus texture.
It makes it, what's the word I can't come up with the word now, but we're looking for a feature. And
But that's not a feature.
Iconic?
iconic feature.
That's
We're
not
looking for it to be iconic in that.
It's not iconic. It's just your.
If I may.
Go ahead.
Hi. My name is Farragut. I'm also with Joe's office at Design Innovation Architects. So we contemplated as well whether we draw that option with the ephes returning on the side or have brick going all the way up to meet the 75%. And the whole reason that we are proposing doing the return is we feel that eventually for the building it's going to be a better look rather than having a masonry wall going all the way up, even though we're changing color on it. So one way it could be viewed is the fact that the top, the cornice line where signage would be eventually, that portion, if it can be looked at as almost a canopy component, all the walls from that point down and all the straight walls at the back are going to have the brick masonry look to them, unless they are a window. So it's a matter of almost semantics, just a little bit, as far as what is a wall versus what is a canopy. And again, if the existing building was not there and designed the way it was designed back 10 years ago, we would not be presenting this in front of you at this moment. We would understand that. So in our mind, this is kind of a compromise solution that we as designers feel it would be more complementary to the existing development, while still meeting the intent of the guidelines, which is where the walls are, the substantial walls, those are going to be looking like the brick masonry.
Is the width of what you're terming the canopy, the height?
Yes.
And I'm calling the width, I
Correct,
guess,
the
but I
height.
mean the height,
Correct.
the same as the existing building?
I believe so. Yes, ma'am.
And the color is the same. isn't it?
Correct. Yes, it would be.
Then
That ties it together with the first building with me, even though this one is different.
Correct. And that's why we feel
It has to
they
be
complement
like the
each
first
other,
building.
but still.
I don't think it needs to be like
No,
the first
no,
building.
it just needs to coordinate with it, in my opinion.
Then using Louise's terminology, cousins is close enough, right?
Right.
They're just kissing cousins.
I don't think we need to, 53% of the facade meeting which doesn't even come close to meeting the architectural designs and standards.
And again, we did not seek a number of 53%. We just said if we want to make the building complementary, that was the net calculation, the resulting calculation.
You said you did this because of the existing building, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, to be compatible with
And
it.
if that existing building had not been there, what would you have done?
Oh, something totally different.
Why not been
Just
there?
a different world. But however, we're been requested by our client. The shopping center has always been envisioned to appear as a complete shopping center, a unified shopping center. It's just that at the time it was built, basically with the downturn in the economy around 2008, nothing else could be built at the time. So we kind of got trapped in this holding period until now.
So when we get to the third phase there, the future, it might be another look.
Well, if the design changes, if design standards change, probably, hopefully not.
It's the evolution.
Well,
I
I
just-
do not want to give up our design standards. We worked and fought too hard for that, and I think you can still complement the building with another building, with the old building. It gives it a little, to me, I don't like everything, like over in Turkey Creek where everything is the same. It all looks the same to me, and a lot of times I can't figure out which building I'm going to. And it's not for lack of signs, but it's just the buildings all look alike.
Okay.
Only last point I would make too is thinking of Turkey Creek and all this, where you're kind of passing all these buildings. You know, when you drive kind of around the corner here, there's nothing else. It's these kind of three little buildings, and so I think that where there can be sort of the difference, and you kind of really feel that difference, and it adds to that element and that design element. This kind of little pocket, these three buildings being so different, I think's just going to feel, from our perspective, kind of funny. I mean, so I think that just being where it is in its isolation and its kind of satellite location, trying to keep them as close together is going to look nicer than this sort of pocket of three buildings that have no kind of respect to each other than, you know, some color tones. That would be my last point.
Well, it will be, you'll be able to see that building and that building coordinated with each other, and that building was built in 2008. That's what it's going to look like. So,
And we're trying to minimize that by having the canopy at least do the wraparound.
But to me, that makes my store stand, and again, I don't do retail, so I don't know, but makes my store stand out makes it stand out. I'm not in that building, or I'm not in this building. I'm in this particular building.
I'll be in the old building.
Yeah. Well, then you need to encourage them to do something to make it
Well,
comply.
I think that ship has sailed. They're not going to come back to, that would be a very expensive consideration to remove all of that, to try to put brick on it, and, yeah. So.
Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Do we have?
Well, I do have a comment in there. When we were going through what we wanted in the town, when you saw a street, everything was not cookie cutter right down the street. It was different. There was distinction.
Distinction, that's a good word for it. Any more questions or comments? And as far as the other points here, are you all in compliance with these, or not compliance, but in agreement that you will?
Yes, we are.
And just one more question, relevant to the acceptance of the brick-looking masonry that we're looking at here. What do we need to do for that approval? And honestly, I'm just asking, is it?
Yeah. That's
based on
something that
these
we'll have to
images?
review when we get a sample of it and see exactly, you know, what it is. You know, there are some definitions in the architectural design standards of at what, you know, what constitutes, you know, acceptable masonry and not, and I'd want to look at those with Mark and see, you know, see whether or not, you know, what you're proposing. I mean, clearly the real brick is compliant. It's just whether or not the other material would fall within the guidelines, and I would just want to look at that.
Okay. So at this time, we can be looking at which of the two schemes would be approved by the commission, and then we come back for the material.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you.
Is your timeline to push to where you have to have a vote tonight?
Honestly, I think Robert's been waiting on us, but I'm not sure. We've started this. Yeah, it would be nice to have a vote, honestly, just also to have a direction.
Okay.
And moving forward on the actual material itself, we can, whether it's your will to have the staff review for approval or come back in front of this commission, you let us know.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Art, which is that, do we have you all review the material, or does that need to come back before us?
I mean,
like
you know, you could, approve it, subject to it being compliant. I mean, they've got two material options. One is clearly compliant, which would be the, actual brick, and if the other material is compliant, then there wouldn't be any reason they couldn't use that either. It's just a matter of if, what the percentages are going to be, what the approximate color is going to be, where it's going to be located on the building. If it, they'll either have to go with the compliant brick, or if the other material turns out to, fall within the guidelines, and, then by all means, they'd be able to use that.
Then it's one of those kind of gray alternative materials where, you're allowing concrete as long as it looks like cut stone or brick, et cetera. So I think it's going to fall in somewhere within that gray area of looking at a sample, looking at the way it's mortared, the fact that there's going to be joints, it's going to be an ashlar pattern, and so on.
Yeah, it is laid in place and it's not panelized, right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
They're essentially they're blocks,
Mhm.
and they're stacked just like an ashlar course would be. The color can vary between darks and lights and so on as well, so it's not all uniform color. And simply you can place reinforcing inside them,
Mhm.
but it does not look like a concrete
Yeah,
block.
and like I said, there are some fairly specific guidelines and definitions in the standards, and I would just want to sit down and look at it and make sure that it was compliant or not.
Thank you.
So,
They can't do that yet.
Art, are we ready to, are you satisfied?
I mean, it's up to y'all on.
Yeah, that's what I'm going.
More
Another question,
vetting of this
please.
one topic.
Between the one on the left and the one on the right, could you point out with your finger what's different? I see it looks like to me from here that both of those.
From the street, they appear the same because you're seeing the larger facade.
Yes.
When you're up close and walking, you see the sides, and that is what is different. Where here the facade only turns this far, then the rest is just masonry on top of this masonry.
There's panelized
Here,
things under
the
each of
panelized
those.
design continues all the way
Yeah.
across. So it's really adding a lot more detail into it.
So,
And that's what the existing building does.
and why can't that be done on the other one then?
Because if we do, then that is an ethos material, and that's where we end up falling down to the 53%.
It's an overhang.
Yeah.
This side thing, it's all an overhang. It comes out about, what, 3 feet, 2 feet,
On the
3
side, I
feet?
think it's about a couple of feet. On the
Yeah.
front, it's about 4 or 5 feet.
Here's Jack's picture.
Yeah.
That helped me.
Yeah.
You can't really see it from that, but there is no panelized, it's like a rectangle. You can barely see it on those ones, but they wouldn't have that in the brick design.
It's still the same on the front.
It's the
Correct.
same on the front,
Front.
but you're
It
missing,
doesn't-
this is what the
Exactly.
side
It's
looks
the little
like,
wrap
and you
on
don't,
the side.
you're not having that on the side.
And what will happen, honestly, is
You're missing all of
when you
that.
look at the side plan, until that future building is built, that side of the building will be substantially exposed coming down the street.
My point, we get the other building in, it's a moot point to me.
You
I
can
don't
see
think-
the sides
I don't
of
think
it.
that side
There now.
Yeah.
is that material to change with the,
Not even sure that's
from
equal
our
to
standards.
3% masonry.
I just don't think it's not a compelling argument to me to do that. We've had some cases, I don't think we're so black and white that we're blind. Okay, we've dealt with it, but it's gotta be something compelling to me to change. And this is not compelling enough to do that to me.
Okay,
Because we're still going to have that match front, and that's going to be 90+% of what anybody sees and even pays any attention to.
Oh, yeah.
okay. Where are we with this, Bart, as far as,
Well, they're agreeable to staff's recommendations and comments with respect to item 1 and 3. They brought their color board and rendering. We need to see the materials to know exactly, whether the second option is compliant or not. And it's your decision as to, what percentage you're going to require. So
Spent a lot of time looking out the window. in the
that's
car, so.
that's where we are.
Can't they meet the architectural standards?
They don't really, because they don't have an iconic element and all the other stuff that we require, so, I mean, if you want to stick strict to them, the building doesn't really do that.
No.
But then you're really kind of throwing a can of worms
Didn't
at
you?
it.
Yeah. You're really messing it up.
okay, you want to go?
No.
No.
I made all the motions now.
So, you know what, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote, but I'm going to make one last comment about it. We don't have an iconic element there. So we are sticking to some of our architectural design standards, but we're not sticking to others. And so you are already compromising your architectural design standards to make sure that these buildings complement each other. So you've made a choice to compromise on one aspect, but not compromise on another aspect, just so we're clear.
I think the front, that to me is a iconic feature, the way the
And we didn't
individual
require it
front
on that building,
pieces.
you're right.
That's about as iconic as it's going to get.
Yeah, and I think that's, it draws it all together.
But it's not an iconic feature. An iconic feature would have one thing sticking out that defines it. I'm just making a point of futility
If it
here.
meets, if you include in the motion to meet architectural standards, then they put an iconic feature on it.
Please don't do that. I'm just making the point that you are compromising your architectural design guidelines. But we did that with the building at the Station West. We did not require an iconic feature on that building. It's kind of like this, where it's.
But we
That's
dealt with
right.
materials.
And I recognize that your point is, I think it's well taken, that we haven't required the iconic element, and hence we are deviating from the standards to some extent. But I think here it's really probably preferable, the
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to impose some iconic element on that, I think it would really make it look worse
Oh, God, yes.
next to
To me, that's the
yours,
compelling element,
you know,
is that
next to the
matching
building you're
as
in.
much as possible. But this side and that side.
Not
that
as
side
drastic,
eventually.
though, in my view, as deviating so much.
Mm-hmm.
If it were like 65 to 75% difference, I mean, I might feel a
53?
little bit
Or
better.
you're-
Yeah, but 53 to 75 is a lot,
On the second one
22%.
over there, they say it's 75%.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to insist that the canopy be not so high or wide, whatever you call it, in order to meet the 75%, because then that would detract even more from the looks of the existing building. So I think it's a matter of, in my mind, my compromising on the total package. And I prefer to stick with the 75% and the lack of iconic element.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion?
I make a motion and we can vote it down if we so desire. How about that?
Do what?
Is that all right?
She's to move to approve
Let's just move on.
She's moving to approve something.
Motion should move on.
You got to point out what you're
Yeah.
approving, which masonry.
What is the motion?
Just give me a second here. I was waiting on Ed St. Clair to do this, but
He's scared.
it seems like he's not going to. I'm going to make a motion that we approve the site plan for Phase 2 of the Little Turkey Creek Commons retail shops as presented to us with the 75% masonry on the net facade area. And let's see, subject to the approval of the staff, at least of the materials as compliant with the standards, architectural design standards, right?
Including the other subject twos.
Yeah.
Yeah, and subject to the others here made by
Staff
the staff.
comments, one in, well, basically it's,
1, 3, and 4, actually all of them.
yeah, 1, 3, and 4 with two pending, two pending
Pending review
verification on the
of the materials,
material.
Okay, is that satisfactory, Bart? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
I'll recuse myself.
Who seconded that?
Did you oppose? We didn't hear that, so.
Because I didn't see it.
Oh.
Ed St. Clair seconded.
Well, we haven't officially.
Okay, Rita, can you adjourn us, please?
We have no utilities at this time?
Not this
Ever
meeting.
have utilities? Have we ever talked about utilities? I don't think I've ever talked about utilities in
come
the
from?
5 years I've been here.
The June
come from?
23rd, June 21st, 2018 meeting is adjourned.
What we can say about it